Chapter 11. Stacks of documents filled the table before Lark as he tinkered with the crystal next to him. The sun passed through the open windows. It was the perfect day to use the vision crystal. He channeled the mana into the orb, and images started playing inside his mind. He could see the clouds above, the trees below, the mountains beyond. He saw scenery through the eyes of the several birds he had captured a week ago. He breathed in, poured in more mana into the orb, and willed the birds to fly further west, toward the Valley of Witches. He surveyed the countryside continuously, careful not to miss even the smallest of details. The birds passed through the hills, then past the small forest beneath it, until they arrived at a plain with a flowing river. Found it. Numerous camps were seen across the plain. Beastmen, armed to the teeth, were moving about. Lark willed the birds to circle the encampment as he analyzed the enemy's vanguard. 300 at most. A lot smaller than I thought. It was exactly as the captured lizard man had said. According to him, this group was led by a member of the Ogre tribe, 4 armed beastmen ranking among the highest of the 16 tribes. Commander Azura, Captain Stone, and Vice Commander Loro. Where are you? As Lark watched the army using his crystal, he noticed a peculiar movement. An ogre came out of a tent and began gathering the soldiers. According to the captured lizard man, Vice Commander Loro was practically the real commander of the vanguard. He was the one who decided the tactics, routes, and formations. Although he could not supersede the commander's authority, his voice was enough to dictate the flow of the battlefield. That must be him. The 4-armed beastman gathered the soldiers and delegated the tasks. The magic Lark used was limited only to visual surveillance. He could not hear the words uttered by the beastmen, but by carefully observing the movements and gestures, as well as the reactions of the soldiers, it was easy to deduce that this man was the vice commander of the vanguard. Lark memorized the image of the ogre. He started looking for Captain Stone, the leader of the scouts, and Commander Azura himself. After several minutes, beastmen exited the same tent. One of them was a large 4-armed ogre holding an axe. Next to him was a lizard man. In just a glance, Lark knew he found his remaining targets. Rage bubbled up in him as he watched the lizard man. That bastard was the one who almost took Gaston's life, the one who had infiltrated the town. Although taking the lives of Commander Azura and Loro was gravely important, Lark also vowed to kill the lizard man. They're moving. Lark cut off the surveillance magic and summoned Anandra. You called for me, young lord, said Anandra. Gather the soldiers and the hunters from Gehelpa, said Lark. The enemies are coming. We're moving out. As you wish. Anandra bowed his head and left the room. It's your turn. Lark looked at the stationary suits of armor next to the wall. The 3 guardians had been unable to fend off the lizardmen that infiltrated the town. Since their cores were made of several goblins, these living suits of armor were unable to see through concealment magic. Light emanated through the slits of their helmets. Growls reverberated through the room. The suits of armor moved, step by step, clanking sounds echoing. In unison, the 3 knelt down before Lark. Show your worth. Lark donned his cloak and grabbed his sword. Slaughter the enemies. Vice Commander Loro sighed. Currently, the vanguard army was advancing through the plains. Their destination was the remote town far east of this place. More than half of the warriors were mounted on horses. Some pulled carts while the rest walked on foot. Everyone was in high spirits. Despite the fact that the scouts were almost annihilated, the warriors still believed that it would be an easy feat to conquer that small town. After all, they had thrice the number of soldiers as the town. Furthermore, they were being led by the commander himself. An ogre beast man approached Loro. He whispered, Sir, we've sent the message, just like you've ordered. Loro subtly looked at him. Good job. Return to your position. Yes, sir. Since Commander Azura had stubbornly refused to request reinforcements from the main army, Loro had to do it in his stead. He discreetly sent a message to General Urkawi, to send at least 1,000 more warriors to aid them in conquering the town. Although humans were weaker than beastmen in general, they were shrewd and cunning. A perfect example was Alexander, the mercenary guild master. That man annihilated Commander Brock's entire army in just a day, using unheard-of tactics. The human had completely blocked the advance of the Third Legion to the Valley of Witches. Their army soon entered a forest. Loro frowned. There was something eerie about this place. The horses neighed as they passed through the sea of trees. Leaves rained from above, as though it was autumn, and the ground was blanketed by dead leaves. The trees themselves looked half-withered, as though life had been recently sucked from them. Loro summoned Stone.
"Captain, this forest—"
Stone nodded.
"It was not like this when we first came here. It's dying."
His last words trailed off. Although they were certain that something was wrong with this forest, they were unable to pinpoint it. Aside from the sound of hooves crunching through the leaves, the footsteps of the warriors and the rattling carts, the forest was quiet. There were no signs of animals anywhere. Even the birds had ceased chirping. Loro approached Commander Azura.
"Commander, there's something wrong with this forest."
Azura snorted.
"That's obvious, Loro, but we'll be leaving it soon. See those hills beyond?"
The commander was right. The forest was small, and it took their army only a couple of hours to pass through it. The end was in sight.
"Nothing has happened so far? I guess everything's all right."
Loro shook off the worries from his mind. The army reached the hills. Once at the top, they stopped for a few minutes to recuperate, then started the march again. Below the hills was another forest, a larger one. The trees were colossal, some of them spanning more than 15 meters in height. Birds chirped and animal trails wound between trees. Loro breathed a sigh of relief. At least this area was normal. They continued through the forest. Several hours after dusk, the army stopped to recuperate.
"Pitch the tents,"
Loro ordered.
"We are to camp here today."
With trained movements, the warriors made camp. Loro assigned several men to scout the surrounding areas and act as guards. One of his men approached him and said,
"Vice Commander, we've received a reply from the main army."
"That's fast." Loro opened the letter handed to him. After reading it, he frowned. It seemed that a few days earlier, Alexander launched a surprise attack against the main army, killing several hundred beastmen. The human mercenary guild master did it using only a handful of elite soldiers, only a few dozen.
"They saw through the decoy, huh?"
Loro was grim. He did not know how Alexander did it, but he had seen through their plan to circumvent the Valley of Witches and strike directly at the eastern region of the Kingdom of Lucas. Now, the main army was preoccupied dealing with sneak attacks from the humans. According to the general, it would take several days before they would be able to send out reinforcements for the vanguard.
"If only that damn Alexander was gone,"
mumbled Loro.
"The eastern region would be as good as ours." "Loro!"
A shout reverberated through the forest. He saw Commander Azura sitting next to a campfire, one of his 4 arms holding a half-emptied bottle of wine.
"Come, drink!"
Azura called to him and hiccuped.
"Let's celebrate the upcoming victory!"
Loro was aghast upon seeing the commander's drunken face. He walked briskly to Azura and took the bottle of wine.
"What are you doing?"
snarled Azura. He glared at Loro, but the vice commander did not back down.
"I'm confiscating this,"
said Loro. He glared at the adjutants next to the commander.
"And the 3 of you, no drinking. Understood?"
The adjutants were crestfallen by the declaration, but they conceded.
"Loro, let me empty that bottle at least,"
Azura begged.
"Please."
"No." Loro's head throbbed.
"What are you thinking? We're going to battle in the next few days."
Sometimes he asked himself why he kept serving this drunkard. Azura was a monster in the battlefield, but his administrative and strategic skills were almost non-existent. He was a musclehead who would charge head-on regardless of the consequences.
"Well, He did save my life.
Loro sighed. Years ago, the commander had risked his life just to save his. It was a moment forever embedded in Loro's memories. Since then, he had decided to wholeheartedly support the commander, despite his cantankerous personality. Loro raised his voice.
Listen, everyone! Whoever is caught drinking will be severely punished. I'll make sure to report this personally to General Urkawi. Understood?
The warriors shivered at the mention of the general's name. They replied in unison.
Yes. Loro, just one more bottle.
Azura groaned. He stood up and wobbled.
Please.
Loro did not reply. He held on to the bottle of wine. It would only be a few more days until they arrived at Blackstone Town. He had to make sure to babysit these guys until then. As he was on his way back to the tent, Loro felt a chilly sensation as a dagger pierced through his neck. He tried screaming for help, but no words came out. Blood flowed down his neck. His vision blurred as he lost his strength.
One down?
Someone whispered through his ear.
2 to go.
A shadow ran past him and entered the sea of trees, disappearing from sight. It happened so fast that none of the beastmen were able to react. Loro fell limp on the ground as his body twitched. He could no longer feel anything.
Vice Commander!
The warriors around him finally noticed what was happening.
Damn it. I can't die here. The Commander? If I die, what will happen to the Commander? Loro!
He heard the commander's wail.
Damn it! Who is it? Show yourself!
Loro's body twitched again. The light in his eyes vanished, and he faded. As though on cue, arrows flew out from between the trees, piercing the unsuspecting beastmen.
We're under attack!
Shouted the adjutants.
Everyone, on your guard!
Unsheathing sounds echoed as the beastmen drew their weapons. Everyone readied themselves for the incoming charge. But it did not come. The barrage of arrows stopped. Several dozen bodies littered the ground. The forest was once again quiet, with only the chirping of ravens to cut the silence. Commander Azura shouted.
What are you doing? After them! Search the area! Comb the entire forest! I want those bastards dead!
He still held the dead vice commander in his arms, trembling as tears flowed down. Although Loro was stubborn, he was why Commander Azura had reached his current position. It was no exaggeration to say that he was the mind that moved the entire vanguard. Azura's sorrow was slowly replaced by vehement rage. He wanted to catch the culprit, hang him, tear him to shreds, and feed him to the burcats. He wanted to personally mutilate his entire body. Azura slowly placed the dead body on the ground. He wiped off his tears and grabbed his battle axe.
Oboris, Lance,
he called out to 2 of his 3 adjutants.
Bring your nimblest men with you. We will find and chase those bastards.
The 2 nodded and immediately gathered their men.
Kale,
snarled Azura.
Sir, you lead the rest of the men while we chase the enemies. Do not lower your guard. Understood.
Kale saluted. One after another, beastmen started leaving the camp, with the commander and his 2 adjutants at the lead. They ran through the forest, eventually disappearing through the shadows of the trees. Kale shouted,
You heard the commander! Be on your guard! Be ready to move out at any time!
They had several carts with them. It would be impossible for the entire army to chase after the enemies. Kale knew that the commander's decision to gather the fastest men to pursue the enemies was the best choice. They could also choose not to give chase, but since they had taken the life of Vice Commander Loro, everyone in the vanguard army wanted to rip the ambushers' bodies into shreds. Had the commander not assigned Kale to oversee the rest of the army, he would have also loved to go after their enemy. Kale's round ears twitched as he heard rustling sounds from their rear. He pulled out his scimitars, each of his 4 hands holding one.
On your guard!
He snarled. Soon, figures emerged from the shadows of the trees. 3 of them, each wearing a cloak. Under the cloak shone the glint of metal armor. With every step, clanking sounds echoed. Cale had fought with humans wearing full plate armor before, and he knew the drawbacks of wearing one. In exchange for protection and defense, they forsake much of their movement and agility. It was easier to deal with them than with mercenaries wearing leather armor.
"Only 3?"
He smirked. He raised his voice.
"Stab them through the gaps of the armor."
The beastmen charged the intruders. Most of them carried axes, while some carried scimitars, longswords, and spears. The suits of armor made long, wailing sounds. They started charging toward the beastmen, colliding with them violently. To Cale's surprise, the beastmen flew into the air. The suits of armor continued charging, unscathed by the collision, growls escaping through the helmets.
"What's happening?"
Beastmen had stronger physiques than humans. Even if these 3 were wearing full plate armor, it should have been impossible to make beastmen warriors fly through the air. Cale grasped his weapons tightly. He readied himself for the upcoming battle. He needed to face them, or his soldiers would suffer casualties. His instinct screamed at him to jump into the fray. But to his astonishment, the suits of armor did not engage in battle. Instead, they continued running toward the carts. Upon reaching them, they each pulled out a talisman from the pouch on their waists and stamped it onto the carts. A few seconds after the talismans were stamped, the symbols engraved there glowed, and the parchment burned into white flames. The flames licked the carts, quickly spreading through their entire structures. Everything had happened so fast that Cale and his men were stunned speechless.
"They're targeting the supplies!"
shouted one of the warriors. Cale realized it too.
"Stop them!"
The beastmen tried stabbing the armor, but their attacks simply bounced off the metal plates. Some made dents, while some successfully stabbed through the gaps, only to realize they were hollow inside. The suits of armor ignored the attacks. They were focused on the carts carrying the rations, burning each of them using the talismans.
"Damn it!"
Cale used the weight of his entire body and struck the suit of armor near him. His axe pierced through the chest plate. The pair of yellow eyes behind the visor glared at him. It grabbed the axe and yanked it from his hands. With a roar, it punched Cale right at the abdomen. Cale managed to block the punch using his forearms, but to his horror, the punch carried enough strength to make him fly toward the nearby tree. He hit the trunk, and splintered wood flew. He coughed as pain coursed through his entire body. He looked at his arms and realized that 2 of them had been broken by that single strike. These suits of armor were monsters. Each had enough strength to rival the members of the Oni tribe. Furthermore, they did not seem to feel pain, making them a far more dangerous opponent. Despite their overwhelming numbers, the beastmen were unable to stop the 3 suits of armor from burning down the food supplies. Those that tried to grab them were sent flying with a single punch, while the unluckier ones had their skulls crushed. By the time the food supplies had all been burned down, the suits of armor ran into the sea of trees, disappearing under the shadow of night. Chapter 12. Valak's chest pounded loudly as he ran through the forest. They were being chased by the beastmen they had attacked. Had he not known better, he would have mistaken those beastmen for monsters. He was sure that if those guys and the basilisks confronted each other, it would become a bloodbath. The beastmen were that dangerous. Looking at the other hunters, he realized that he was not the only one panic-stricken. At any moment, those guys were going to catch up to them. The mere thought of those axes cleaving them in half made him run faster. I know this may seem impossible, but I want everyone to remain as calm as possible during our surprise attack. I want everyone to completely heed my instructions no matter what. Those words uttered by the young master before they commenced the assault echoed in his mind.
"You demons! You scum! Stop hiding! Show yourselves! Where are you?"
A loud shout echoed in the forest. Ravens flew in flocks as trees rustled. The young master raised a hand, signaling everyone to stop and stay still. The footsteps of their pursuers were getting near. Everyone held their breaths, like when they hunted in the forest around Gehelpa village. With their keen vision developed from hunting in the dim forest, they could see the silhouettes of their enemies despite the darkness of the night. The young master made a fist, and on cue, everyone channeled their mana into their bows and fired their arrows. The arrows whistled past the trees and struck their targets perfectly. Azura and his adjutants successfully blocked the arrows using their weapons, though some of the beastmen were pierced right in the forehead. Several beastmen fell limp and lifeless on the ground in an instant.
"Over there!"
shouted one of the beastmen. Commander Azura's veins popped and he ran toward the hunters, his speed bordering the absurd. "Do it like we've practiced," Valak reminded himself. "Trust the young master." The young master commanded, "Scatter." The hunters dispersed into two groups. Lark remained in his position while the rest of the hunters ran in opposite directions. Azura shouted at his men,
"Don't let the humans get away! After them!"
The beastmen also divided themselves into two groups, each being led by an adjutant. They chased the hunters. Azura, on the other hand, continued charging at Lark. Lark leaked out his mana, drawing Azura to target him personally. The commander of the vanguard could tell that this young human was the leader of this small private army. Upon reaching Lark, Azura raised his battle axe into the air and slashed at the human. The speed of his strike created a small gust of wind as it cut through only air.
"What?"
Azura was baffled for a moment. He was sure he had struck his target, but now he realized it was nothing but an afterimage. He turned around and saw Lark a good distance away from him. The noble was holding a scroll. He opened it and channeled his mana into the runes engraved inside. "The lizard we captured was not lying, huh?" Lark smiled. "The commander is indeed a musclehead. With the vice-commander dead, this army's nothing but a puppet with no puppeteer." The runes on the scroll glowed, before turning into flames and collapsing into ashes. To Azura's surprise, the sound of footsteps around them vanished entirely. He could no longer feel the presence of his men, nor those of the fleeing humans. In this forest, there was this young man and him.
"What did you do?"
Azura frowned. Lark shrugged. "There's no need for you to know." With those words, the figure of the young man slowly faded away, disappearing into the night. Only his voice remained. "You're strong indeed. I have no intention of using up all my mana for a musclehead like you," said Lark. "Let's talk. I've heard that the United Gracchus Alliance plans on invading the eastern region. Is there a way out of this?" Azura snorted. This human was obviously trying to buy time. But for what?
"It is a decree of the Beast King."
Azura rested his axe on his shoulder, his eyes swiveling left and right as he tried to locate the presence of the human.
"His will is absolute. There's no point in questioning it."
There was a sigh. "There's no point in questioning it?" A typical answer of a musclehead. How disappointing. Azura's eyebrows twitched. He snarled,
"This damn puny human dares to—"
"It's not even a year since I implemented the new policies in my domain. I've been making it self-sufficient, and will be wholly so within the next half a year at the very least. But if the United Gracchus Alliance successfully crosses over to the eastern region, I'll have no choice but to postpone my plans." The human's voice was ice-cold. "To be frank, I have no interest in your war, whatever the reason is." Commander Azura still could not locate the presence. How was this possible? The magic of this human was comparable to the magic of Captain Stone.
"Human, come out!"
Azura growled.
"No matter what you do, there is no stopping this war. Just like I've told you, the will of the Beast King is absolute. The United Gracchus will reclaim the eastern region."
The human momentarily paused. "Reclaim? I see. This land once belonged to your people?"
"That's right."
Azura grabbed his axe and swung it through the air, creating a gust of wind.
"But enough with this petty talk. Come out!"
Azura heard rustling sounds from his left. Soon 3 figures emerged. All of them wore full plate armor, their cloaks tattered. There was something eerie about these figures, but Commander Azura was unable to pinpoint why. "About time," said the human. His figure slowly appeared from the darkness. "This is war. You wouldn't say that 4 versus 1 isn't fair, right?" Azura finally understood. This puny human was stalling to allow these guys time to arrive. But what difference would it make? At the end of the day, humans would still be humans. The suits of armor walked to the young man and, in unison, knelt down. The one at the middle groaned. As though he understood what was said, the human nodded. "You've successfully completed the mission. Good job." He placed a hand on the one at the middle, and the dents, scratches, and holes in the armor closed up. He did the same for the other two, returning them into their original states. "Let's start," the human said. "I still have to annihilate the rest of the army after this, so I can't spare you all of my mana." He spoke to the 3 suits of armor. "Kill him." The suits of armor groaned, stood up, and charged at Azura. It was a direct attack, without strategy or tactics.
"These guys are confident with their strength, huh?"
Azura snorted. It was funny that these 3 humans would even try to contest him using only brawn.
"Come!"
The suits of armor swung their swords at him, and Azura blocked them with his battle-axe, one after another. Using his other 3 arms, Azura struck the suits of armor with his fists. He managed to dent the armor several times, but his 3 opponents did not show any signs of weakening. What was happening? Shouldn't the human inside the suit have some of his organs crushed by now? Azura shook off his thoughts. It did not matter. As long as he kept pummeling his opponents, they would eventually die. No matter how tough they were still mortal. Azura gnashed his teeth, raised his battle-axe, and struck the suit of armor closest to him. His axe cleaved through the armor. His opponent's feet sank several inches deep into the soft dirt from the tremendous impact. But to his surprise, the suit of armor simply glared at him. It groaned and stabbed him in the thigh with the sword. Azura looked where his battle-axe had struck. There was no blood. It was hollow inside. These guys were not human.
"Damn it!"
Azura roared and punched the suit of armor in the face. It flew into the air, hit the nearby tree, then stood without hesitation and charged at the commander. Azura pulled out the sword that had stabbed through his thigh. His blood spurted out all down his leg. He tossed it onto the ground. This was nothing. He had been in more perilous situations before.
"There's no way you guys are immortal!"
roared Azura.
"Come on!"
The battle continued. The 3 suits of armor continued their attacks despite the dents and cuts to their bodies. Even through his injuries, Azura parried the attacks, retaliating with death blows. He could not even charge at Lark, who commanded these puppets. Just blocking the attacks from these 3 monsters was taking all of Azura's strength and focus. After half an hour, the 3 suits of armor finally fell limp on the ground. Their bodies were cut and dented in several places. One tried to stand, but it quivered and fell back to the ground. The light inside their visors dimmed as faint groans escaped their lips. They kept trying to stand and fight for their master, but their bodies refused to move. Azura, on the other hand, was still standing. He was huffing hard, his chest rising and falling rapidly, but he was standing. The battle-axe he held had several chips taken from the edge of the blade, and his entire body was riddled with cuts and bruises. Blood dripped from the wounds, covering the ground under his feet. Despite the injuries, the bloodlust in his eyes continued blazing. Azura wiped the blood dripping from a cut on his lip.
"You're next, brat."
Lark, who had been standing in the same place for half an hour, did not reply. Instead, he pointed a finger at the suits of armor on the ground. A thread of mana flowed from his fingertip until it enveloped the suits of armor. The suits of armor groaned, the metal clanked, and they started standing up. The cuts on their bodies started closing, and the dents reverted. Although this consumed a lot of mana, it was far more efficient than using middle-tier magic to confront this commander. When the suits of armor had recovered their original state, Commander Azura was stupefied. It had taken him everything he had just to survive the non-stop onslaught, and now he had to do it all over again, with his battered body. Azura was livid. Humans loved to play dirty.
"This damn coward,"
he growled.
"Stop hiding behind those puppets and fight me, damn human!"
Lark again did not reply. He flicked his fingers, and the suits of armor began their charge. The assaults continued against the injured commander. This time, the battle went more quickly. In just a few minutes, Commander Azura's head was severed from his body. It flew into the air, then dropped and rolled on the ground. Lark noticed that there were tears at the corner of the beastman's eyes. Was it rage? Frustration? Regret? He did not know. There was no need to find the answer. This was war. He needed to devour these invading beastmen before they came any closer to his town. Lark ordered one of the suits of armor to retrieve the commander's head and put it inside a small leather bag. Lark looked at the sky. The moon's beautiful tonight. 2 down, 3 to go. It was finally time to hunt that lizard man, the one that almost killed Gaston. Lark had reserved his mana for this moment. Now, Captain Stone, said Lark. Where are you? Accompanied by his puppets, Lark disappeared into the shadow of night. Chapter 13. After killing Commander Azura, Lark regrouped with the hunters from Gehelpa. The illusion magic worked easily against the beastmen. This forest was dense, and with illusion magic to misdirect the opponents, it was simple to guide them to being lost. Lark noticed that one of his hunters had a cut on his back. He was profusely bleeding, his face pallid. He had been struck by one of the beastmen during the escape, but thanks to Lark's illusion magic, he managed to keep his life. Here. Lark handed him a small vial. Drink it. It'll make you feel better. The man took the vial weakly, opened it, and drank the contents. After several seconds, the wound on his back closed on its own. His face started to regain its color. The man looked at the potion, then at the young master, bewilderedly. Lark ignored him. He said to Valak, Sound the horn. Valak nodded. You heard the young master. Sound the horn. Several hunters withdrew small horns from their pouches. At the signal, they blew. A mellifluous sound, which reminded Lark of a growling red scar bear, reverberated through the forest. As the hunters continued blowing the horns, Lark pointed toward the sky. He channeled mana through his hand, and an orb of fire, around the size of a man's fist, manifested at the tip of his finger. He breathed in and shot the orb of fire into the sky, creating a trail of crimson through the air. Lark looked at the suits of armor standing nearby. The 2 groups of beastmen, each led by an adjutant, must be trying their best to find a way out of the forest by now. Let's start, said Lark. We'll hunt the beastmen scattered in this forest. After receiving instructions from the young master, the soldiers from Blackstone Town hid themselves in the forest, a good distance away from the beastmen's campsite. Everyone was anxious about the upcoming battle. Although beastmen were treated as slaves in the kingdom, they had strength superior to humans. Captain Karat, whispered a soldier, is this really a good idea? The beastmen have greater numbers. If we charge at them now, we'll die. The soldier did not speak the words out loud. He was afraid. He knew that the others were the same. We've fought with goblins before, said Captain Karat. It'll be just like that. Just do what you've been trained to do, and we'll be fine. Karat knew that this was not true. There was a vast difference between goblins and beastmen. But keeping up the soldiers' morale was more important right now. He looked at Anandra, who calmly leaned next to a tree. He had been looking at the sky. The sound of a horn reverberated through the forest. In the sky, a thread of crimson light flew past. Everyone stiffened. This was the young master's signal. The thread of crimson flew toward the east, directing them where they should go. Assemble the spears, said Anandra. Yes, Commander. With practiced movements, the soldiers assembled their spears. Each one spanned 2 meters in length, the edge of its blade jagged to increase the damage. On the waist of each soldier, a short sword dangled. Move out! With Anandra in the lead, the soldiers started moving through the sea of trees. They moved toward the direction the crimson thread of light had pointed. Anandra signaled his men to stop. He unsheathed his sword and ran quickly through the forest. After 5 minutes, he returned. The blade of his sword had blood clinging to it. I've taken care of the scouts, said Anandra.
"I've seen their camp. Just like the young master predicted, they are preparing to move out."
As time went by, Anandra was in awe of the young master's foresight. Everything until this point had been predicted by the noble beforehand. Even the route the beastmen were going to take had been considered, and various strategies to deal with it had been prepared. If someone had told Anandra that the young master was the second coming of Rurukashu, the god of war, he would have believed it. With the scouts dead, the soldiers crept up to the beastmen's camp. Now, they only had to wait for the next signal before they commenced the attack. From their position, they heard several shouts.
"Captain Stone!"
snarled Kale.
"Are you out of your mind? You're telling us to abandon Commander Azura here, in this forest? Is that it?"
Kale unsheathed his scimitars. Tension filled the air as the beastmen around them watched.
"That's right," said Stone. "You've seen the corpse. It's the body of Commander Azura. There's no mistaking it. Kale, I'm not sure what happened to the warriors who left to chase after those humans, but it's likely that they're all dead by now."
His statement made the beastmen in the camp shiver. They seemed horrified.
"You damn lizard!"
roared Kale. He charged at Stone, swinging his 4 scimitars. Stone nimbly dodged it from every direction.
"From thy light, shadows emerge, blend," chanted Stone.
Slowly his figure disappeared from sight.
"Listen, Kale, think about it. If we all die here, there will be no one to notify General Urkawi. Dead men tell no tales. You're the only officer we have left. These ogres will not listen to me, an outsider."
Kale hesitated for a moment. Still, the rage in his eyes continued to blaze.
"Is that the same reasoning you had when you abandoned your men in Blackstone Town? Out of the entire group of scouts, only 4 of you came back. Pathetic."
Despite the ridicule, Stone remained unperturbed. He held his stance.
"Unlike the vanguard, the role of the scouts is reconnaissance. Even if we have to sacrifice several lives, we have to live, return, and report back. You should realize this by now. We've been far too focused on Alexander. We failed to realize that he's not the only dangerous human in this kingdom."
Kale looked at the beastmen in the camp. Everyone's morale had fallen after hearing that Commander Azura was dead. Although it was not yet confirmed since the head was missing, the body they found in the forest greatly resembled that of the commander. And now, this lizard man was telling everyone to regroup and return to the main army's camp. Everyone was torn between the choices. Silence cloaked the group.
"We're not turning back,"
said Kale finally.
"If Commander Azura is really dead, then we will all follow him gladly into the grave. Isn't that right, everyone?"
The beastmen around him clenched their fists and shouted,
"That's right! We'll follow the commander until the very last!"
Stone deactivated his magic, revealing himself. He sighed.
"Molith, Salith,"
2 lizard men replied in unison.
"Yes. Untether the Burkats. We're leaving."
The lizard men saluted.
"Understood."
Stone sighed once again.
"Won't you reconsider? There's no point in dying here just for principle."
Kale snorted.
"Leave. We don't need cowards like you."
The lizard men soon arrived with the Burkats. Stone mounted one of them.
"I see. It's regrettable."
He paused and looked straight into Kale's eyes.
"I don't hate you, Kale, but this is where we part."
Just as Stone and his men were about to move out, arrows flew from the sky and struck several beastmen. The Burkats recoiled. Metallic sounds echoed as the beastmen unsheathed their weapons.
"We're under attack! Everyone, on your guard!"
Kale looked left and right.
"Damn it, what were the scouts doing?"
As arrows continued raining down, they heard the sound of a horn. The soldiers of Blackstone Town recognized their cue. They emerged from the shadows between the trees, each of them holding a spear.
"We're surrounded."
Stone clicked his tongue.
"Lizard men, follow me. We're getting out of this place."
Stone slapped the reins and the Burkats sped up. The other lizard men followed. They ran to the east, the only opening in the circle, before disappearing from sight. As Stone and the lizardmen left, the battle quickly became a melee. The three powerful suits of armor appeared again and started killing beastmen left and right. As they had been instructed, 3 Blackstone soldiers engaged a single beastman warrior. By teaming up in this way, they were able to bridge the gap in physical strength and experience. Lark targeted the remaining adjutant. It was a swift encounter. He did not give the remaining officer a chance to prepare and retaliate. Soon, Cale's head flew into the air and rolled on the ground. After seeing the adjutant die, the remaining beastmen became enraged and charged recklessly toward the Blackstone soldiers. Groans, growls, and cries of rage reverberated as metal clashed against metal. The strong scent of blood permeated the air. With no one to lead them, the beastmen easily fell to the forces of Lark and his soldiers. It was a bloodbath. After the last beastman had collapsed, Anandra approached Lark.
"Young master, some lizardmen managed to escape."
Lark looked at the campsite, littered with corpses. "I know, but it's fine. I've prepared a trap before coming here. We'll be able to catch up to them in no time." The Vanguard army had passed through the area filled with magic poison. The lush forest was now dead and filled with the fatal miasma. The army had not noticed they were breathing deadly fumes, but it had weakened the beastmen enough to allow the Blackstone soldiers to defeat them. It had taken a while before the symptoms of magic poisoning became evident, but all of these beastmen were poisoned. Each had been unable to fight with their full potential. Those lizardmen would soon feel the effects of magic poisoning. It would be easy to catch and kill them once they had been weakened further. "For now, focus on treating the wounded," Lark said to the soldiers. "Yes, sir," Lark said to Captain Karat. "How many soldiers died?" Karat bit his lips.
8 soldiers, young master."
Despite the precautions taken beforehand, several soldiers had still died. It was a small number, taking into account who they were fighting. If not for Lark and Andra and the suits of armor looking out for the Blackstone soldiers, there would have probably been more casualties. Some of the Blackstone soldiers knelt and cried next to the corpses. Since the population of the town was so small, everyone knew their neighbor by name or face. Their sense of loss must be substantial. But Lark knew this was a necessary sacrifice. They need to protect their home using their own strength. These soldiers needed to experience what the battlefield was like. An unsheathed sword was nothing but an ornament. "Recover the dead bodies of the Blackstone soldiers," said Lark. "We'll hold a burial ceremony for them once we get back."
"Yes."
Karat bowed his head. "Anandra," said Lark, "I'll chase after the lizards that escaped. You shall be in charge of the army."
"Understood."
Lark looked at the dead bodies of the beastmen scattered on the ground. "Also, I want you to cut off the heads of all the beastmen and bring them back to the town. I have a use for them later." Anandra did not question Lark's order. He simply bowed his head.
"As you wish."
Lark looked to the east, toward where the lizardmen had fled. Now it's time to chase those lizard bastards. Chapter 14. At the same time when Lark and the Blackstone soldiers were battling with the Vanguard army, Blood Tachi, the assassin group from Black Midas, made their way to Blackstone Town. Above them flew a sparrow made of light, leaving a trail of white behind. There was no tracking magic more reliable than this. As long as this sparrow existed, it would eventually lead them to the places their target had visited. They moved through the plains relentlessly, eventually arriving at a forest. "Hey, we're getting farther from the main road," said one of the assassins. Everyone else noticed it, but they continued to follow the sparrow made of light regardless. There must have been a reason it was leading them toward this particular place. "Stop." Alphonse raised his hand and everyone halted. The sparrow seemed to have understood the command too. It simply hovered above them, flapping its wings. "Leader," said Seth. Alphonse placed a hand on the hilt of his sword. He looked around the forest as though waiting for a monster to pounce on them. He slowly walked to a nearby tree, then touched its bark. "This is," mumbled Alphonse. He knocked on it, creating a thudding noise.
It has completely turned into a rock.
Seth narrowed her eyes.
Stone morphosis spell? But why use it on a tree? That's a high-tier spell that consumes a lot of mana.
Alphonse nodded.
Or petrification spell. Those are the only two possibilities.
Seth and the rest of the assassins understood the implications. They realized there was a strong possibility of encountering a powerful magician in this forest. Those two spells mentioned by the leader were high-tier spells. Only those near the rank of royal court magician were capable of using it.
Is it Lark Marcus?
Seth giggled. She felt a hot sensation flowing through her skin the moment she realized this possibility.
If he's the one who turned that large tree into stone, then we'll definitely have a fun time killing him. I can't wait.
Alphonse sighed. He'd been with her for 3 years now. He knew that out of all the members of Blood Tachi, Seth enjoyed slaughter the most.
Enough. Everyone be on your guard. We could get attacked by that magician any moment now.
The members of Blood Tachi nodded.
Seth,
said Alphonse.
Lead us there.
Yes, yes,
Seth breathed in. She willed the Sparrow of Light to move once again. After moving through the forest for several hours, the assassins arrived at a village. Everyone was vigilant once they saw the broken gate, splintered wood, scattered arrows, and traces of blood on the ground. A battle had taken place here, at least a week ago, maybe even longer. The Sparrow of Light flew into the village. Everyone looked at their leader.
Be on your guard,
said Alphonse.
We'll go inside.
Upon entering the village, they realized it was abandoned. There was not a trace of a living being here. Several pieces of furniture and equipment were left behind, as though everyone had been in a hurry to escape the village.
What happened here?
Asked one of the assassins. The same question ran through everyone's mind. The Sparrow landed on the doorstep of a cabin. It indicated that their target, Lark Marcus, once stayed in this particular place. Why did he stay here? What made everyone evacuate this place? What kind of battle took place in this village? So many questions, without an answer. Everyone looked around the village.
He's no longer here,
Alphonse concluded. Seth clicked her tongue in disappointment.
Lead us to the next trail of the target,
said Alphonse.
Okay.
Seth opened her palm. The Sparrow flapped its wings several times, flew about for a few moments, then landed on her hand. After a few seconds, it turned into particles of light.
Hey, you still have some of that, right?
Seth said to the assassin next to her.
Give it to me.
The assassin pulled out a small piece of cloth cut from a tunic the inn had provided. It was one of Lark's possessions that had been left behind. Seth was about to cast her incantations when a hiss reverberated through the village. Everyone reached for the hilt of their sword, their eyes scanning the area vigilantly. The hissing sound intensified. Soon, the source appeared.
What the hell is that?
Breathed one of the assassins. A colossal snake slithered into view. It spanned more than 50 meters in length, probably even reaching 100, they were not sure. Its body was large enough to swallow an entire horse whole, and its scales, glimmering in the sun, seemed like plate armor. But the members of Blood Tachi noticed something peculiar. There were scars covering its body. Though it had healed, something had injured this monster many times.
Great,
sighed Seth.
We're here trying to find that noble, but now we're supposed to face that monster?
Seth, shut up,
said Alphonse. He unsheathed his sword.
All of you prepare for battle. It would be hard to escape from it in this forest. We'll suffer casualties if we turn our back on it. We're killing it here and now.
Unsheathing sounds reverberated. The colossal snake hissed. Its slit-like eyes glared at the humans before it.
This should be a piece of cake,
said Seth.
Those cut marks were caused by a sword. Those scales looked really tough, but the beast is not impenetrable.
Scatter!
Shouted Alphonse. The members of Blood Tachi scattered. The colossal snake hissed angrily. It swiveled its head left and right before attacking Alphonse. It lunged at the leader of the assassins, its mouth opened widely as it attempted to swallow him whole. Alphonse jumped to his left and evaded the attack. He gripped the hilt of his sword tightly and, clenching his teeth, struck at the snake's body. To his surprise, he could only scratch its scale. The other members of Blood Tachi used this opening. They dashed forward and released a barrage of attacks on the colossal snake. The monster hissed angrily, opened its mouth, then spat out a viscous green fluid. One of the assassins failed to evade. His left shoulder was struck. "Ah!" he wailed. The part where the green fluid struck sizzled. Slowly, his entire left arm detached and fell to the ground. The assassins who saw this were horrified.
"It's corrosive," shouted Alphonse. "Don't let even a drop of that thing hit you."
The assassin whose left arm was severed tried to run away, but the monster noticed him. It lunged and opened its mouth wide, swallowing him whole. Everyone heard the man's muffled shouts as he was swallowed by the giant snake. After only a few seconds, the muffled shouts disappeared completely.
"Shit, what the hell is that thing?"
one of the assassins spat.
"And we can't even wound it."
He gripped the hilt of his sword and glared at the blade.
"This damn useless sword."
"Enough,"
said Alphonse. He said to the man next to him,
"Oliver, can you pin him down for us? A few seconds should be enough."
The assassin nodded.
"Understood. I don't know what kind of monster this thing fought before, but those cut marks on its body haven't completely healed yet,"
said Alphonse. He shouted,
"Everyone! Once Oliver pins him down with magic, stab the places where he's been cut already. Those haven't fully healed yet will be able to penetrate its scales."
Each assassin readied his weapons. Oliver spread both his hands wide and channeled his mana through the air.
"O goddess Maruna, strike thy enemy with your wrath. Shackle it with your might. Bind!"
Chains of wind manifested with his magic. More than half of Oliver's mana was used just to cast this single spell. The chains coiled around the colossal snake's body, then latched into the ground. The snake tried to slither, but the magical chains bound its movements.
"Now!"
snarled Alphonse. The assassins leapt into the air and stabbed the body of the colossal snake. Just like their leader predicted, the spots wounded before had not completely healed. Their swords managed to penetrate the same cuts. They did not know who managed to cut the scales of this monster, but thanks to him, they now had a chance of killing this beast. They plunged their swords deeper into the wounds, making the snake hiss in agony. It tried moving its head left and right, but the chains held it in place. After several seconds, the chains made of wind formed cracks. They soon shattered into hundreds of pieces. Now free, the snake shook its body violently and tried to bite off the assassins clinging to its body. With trained movements, the assassins pulled out their swords and scattered out. Blood dripped profusely from the wounds of the colossal snake. The light in its eyes started to dim. It tried to remain upright.
"This thing's huge,"
chuckled Seth.
"but it's weak."
"What do we do next, leader?"
said Oliver.
"I can't cast the binding spell again. I've used up almost all of my mana."
"It's fine,"
said Alphonse.
"It's almost dead. We'll wait it out."
True to his word, the colossal snake hissed angrily one last time before its body fell. Dust flew up as the corpse thudded to the ground. Alphonse walked slowly toward it. Without hesitation, he stabbed both of the creature's eyes to make sure it was dead. He flicked his sword, clearing it of blood, and sheathed it. Unlike Seth, he did not believe this monster was weak. If not for its previous injuries, they would not have been victorious. Or even if they had been, they would have suffered more casualties. He was grateful to the one who had wounded this monster.
"It is regretful that we have lost one of our number, but we still have to complete our mission,"
said Alphonse.
"Seth, your magic."
Seth brushed off the dust that clung to her black clothes.
Yes."
She chanted her magic, and another sparrow of light manifested before them. It flapped its wings and hovered in place of its summoner.
"Lead us to that place,"
she said. The sparrow flew slowly toward the northwest.
"Let's go,"
said their leader. Everyone was about to leave the village when another hissing sound echoed. They all pulled out their weapons, then jumped away from the snake's corpse, but soon realized the sound was not coming from the dead monster.
"Another one."
Alphonse was grim. Just as he speculated, another colossal snake had made its appearance. But unlike the previous monster clad in black scales, The new one was pure white. Moreover, a third eye was prominent on its forehead.
Damn it. Another one. Is this village a snake's den or something? But look, it's a lot smaller than the one we've already fought. Yeah, around half the size, I guess.
Realizing that the new attacker was smaller than the one they had killed, all of the assassins felt confident. It did not have the same thick scales as the colossal black snake. They were sure that their swords would easily pierce through this snake's skin. Only Seth and Alphonse thought differently. They looked at each other warily. There were very few serpents that matched the same description. If their hunch was correct, then they would soon be facing a battle of life or death, a battle much fiercer than the previous one.
"Leader," mumbled Seth.
This was the first time Alphonse had seen her afraid. He said,
"It's fine. There's no way a basilisk would appear in this forest. It's probably just an oversized monster with 3 eyes, that's all."
Seth swallowed the lump in her throat nervously.
I see. That must be true."
But they were soon proved incorrect. Upon reaching the dead body of the monstrous black snake, the white snake hissed violently. Tears appeared at the corner of its eyes as it glared at the humans. Its third eye glowed. To their utter horror, 2 of the assassins turned into stone. Alphonse was the quickest to react. He pulled Seth away from the range of the spell. After only seconds, all of the assassins aside from Alphonse and Seth had turned into stone. Seth's eyes were wide as she stared at this horrific development. She wailed,
"It's a basilisk! What is a Calamity-class monster doing in this place?"
When she turned to Alphonse, she noticed that his left leg had turned into stone. This was because of her. He had tried to save her instead of escaping himself.
"Leader, your leg!"
She was hysterical. Alphonse mustered a smile.
"I'm fine."
He looked toward the white basilisk. It crushed the stone statues of his comrades one by one.
"You should run while it's busy crushing those guys."
"But—" Tears started flowing down her cheeks.
"I can't leave you here. What about the mission? No, that's no longer important. I can't let you die here. We'll escape together."
The basilisk finished crushing the statues. It slowly turned its head toward them, its 3 eyes glaring in their direction. Alphonse growled,
"Listen, I told you to run away. Go, now."
Seth also looked toward the white basilisk. Her mind was screaming at her to run, but her feet remained rooted to the ground. She could not bear to leave the leader behind. Time passed like an eternity. Seth gritted her teeth and pulled out a dagger.
"I've decided. I'm not leaving you here. We'll kill Lark Marcus after this. Together. You can't die yet, leader."
Alphonse groaned. He tried to move, but the petrified leg started forming cracks.
"The third eye's the source of the basilisk's magic, right?" declared Seth. "As long as I destroy that part, it should be possible to kill that monster."
"Wait, that's not the—"
But Seth did not listen. She dashed forward and jumped onto the basilisk's head. She gripped her dagger tight and stabbed the third eye of the monster. Blood spurted everywhere.
"I did it!"
But her joy was short-lived. The white basilisk hissed and cast its spell. Seth felt her entire body stiffen. She fell down to the ground, turning completely into stone. But peculiarly, she could still see everything. She could still feel the cold, hard ground. She was still alive, but she could not move. The white basilisk slithered forward, its large body creating a shadow over Seth's petrified body. Seth heard Alphonse shout, and she heard cracking sounds, quickly followed by a roar. This did not last even a few seconds, before silence once again returned to the forest. Alphonse tried charging at the white basilisk despite his petrified leg, only to be turned completely into stone by the monster's magic. Seth wanted to cry, to wail, but no tears came. The white basilisk hissed, and with great force, crushed her petrified body. Chapter 15. Mikhail's stomach grumbled as he sat cross-legged in his cell in the dungeon. He'd been locked up here for more than a week already. Every day he was forced to eat only stale bread and water. Although he was a knight and his body was stronger than most people, He was starting to feel the effects of emaciation. His cheeks had become sunken, and dark marks encircled his eyes.
For the king, I have to endure just a bit more.
With his skills, it would have been easy to escape this underground jail, but doing so would blow his cover as a mere serf. The allegations and suspicions cast on him would be confirmed once he escaped. Mikhail breathed in. This place was dark, no windows. The air was humid and stale. Metallic sounds echoed, and the iron gate of the dungeon creaked open. Several footsteps reverberated down the stone hall. Mikhail squinted when the torchlight reached his cell. 5 people stood outside his jail.
Is that him, sir?
A guard asked the fat man next to him. The fat man nodded.
That's definitely my client.
He glared at the guards and snarled,
He looks famished. You should have at least fed him.
The guards jumped from the sudden berating. The fat man shouted,
What are you waiting for? Release him!
Immediately, one of the guards took out the keys and unlocked the cell. They approached Mikhail nervously and bowed their heads.
We're sorry, sir. We had to lock you up, make sure that—
Enough!
The fat man shoved the guards away and approached Mikhail. He scrutinized the prisoner from head to toe. He sighed.
I'm sorry. By the time I woke up, it had been already more than a week since that incident. Who would have thought that these imbeciles would lock you up?
With the torches illuminating the entire cell, the apology was clear in the fat man's expression. Mikhail knew this man well. Big Bun, the leader of One Stop Klop. Also the brother of Big Mona, the head merchant of Lion City. Almost 2 weeks earlier, disaster befell the garrisons stationed next to the Lake of the Full Moon. Despite the presence of a Mayanite stone, monsters attacked the soldiers, their numbers nearing the tens of thousands. It was a large enough force to overthrow the entire capital. Luckily, the soldiers had a backup plan in case the Mayanite failed during a full moon. The leader of the soldiers ordered his men to retreat back to Lion City. Dozens of soldiers lost their lives that day, and it was a miracle that Mikhail and the fat merchant actually managed to escape and survive. Though he survived, Big Bun was gravely injured during the escape. It took him several days before he finally woke up after being treated. Naturally, the suspicious eyes of the soldiers fell on Mikhail, a serf. They had locked him up to be sure he had not attacked the merchant, at least until Big Bun finally woke up. When the merchant awoke, he went to the serf.
Money is the law, said Big Bun. As a merchant, it hurts my pride that my client's been locked up here because of my mistakes. Like I've told you before, you'll be under the protection of my caravan until you reached Blackstone Town. I've failed as a merchant. Forgive me.
Mikhail's eyes widened upon seeing Big Bun bowing to him. He disliked this fat man and his greed, but it seemed that he too had his pride and convictions. Mikhail shook his head. He still had his act as a serf to play.
It's fine, honorable sir. I understand.
He stood up and pretended to wobble. Big Bun immediately grabbed his arm and helped him stand.
Are you all right?
Said the merchant.
Damn it, this is really hurting my pride. What a blunder.
He shouted at the guards.
Prepare the bath and make a sumptuous feast, now!
The guards stiffened.
Yes, sir.
And you,
Big Bun said to the guard next to him,
lead me to my brother.
Understood.
Since Big Bun was the brother of the head of the Merchant Guild, everyone heeded his orders. Although Mikhail was under the guise of a serf, several servants assisted him in taking a bath. After his body was cleansed, he was led to a room inside the Merchants Guild. A sumptuous feast enough for 12 men had been prepared. Mikhail's stomach grumbled. Despite being a knight, he salivated upon seeing food again for the first time in several days.
Please, eat to your heart's content.
A servant led him to a seat. Mikhail sat down and began eating. The food prepared here was almost comparable to the meals prepared in Behemoth City's castle. The door of the room opened and several men entered. Big Bun was among them. After looking at the fat man next to Big Bun, Mikhail realized that he was the brother and the head of the Merchant Guild. Their semblance was so high that it was impossible to think them strangers.
Is that the serf locked up by my men?
Said Big Mona haughtily. Unlike Big Bun, he looked at Mikhail condescendingly.
You still haven't changed, little brother. I do understand that he's a client, but to think that you would allow him to partake in our feast?"
Big Bun frowned.
"This is my pride as a merchant. He paid, and I promised I would take him to his old man. I will not go back on my word, big brother."
Big Mona waved his hand dismissively as he sighed.
"Fine. I'm hungry. Let's eat."
The two sat down with their men. Mikhail listened as he ate. After following their discussions, he learned that the men sitting in this room were all prominent merchants of Lion City. He could feel the discontent of the merchants around him. They surely did not like having a lowly serf sharing a table with them. But since Big Bun himself allowed Mikhail to partake in this feast, they did not dare spout a single word about it.
"I'm glad you survived that incident,"
Big Mona spoke, his mouth still full of meat.
"When I heard the news, I immediately mobilized my personal army to rescue you. Thank God, the commander of the garrison was smart enough to escape. I plan on giving him a reward later."
Big Bun frowned.
"I don't even want to remember that incident. I've never been so close to death in my entire life. I'm just glad that those monsters come out only during a full moon. Otherwise, this city would have been reduced to rubble long ago."
Mikhail could vividly remember everything. The tens of thousands of monsters coming out of the lake. The humanoid wolf standing at its center. Once he got to Blackstone Town, he would write a report about it to the king.
"I've heard peculiar news, brother," said Big Bun. "Is it true you visited the Lord's castle? That you personally met that damnable Valkyrie?"
The hatred within Big Bun's voice was apparent. Back in the capital, Mikhail heard from Big Bun that the lord of this city had a weird fetish for beastmen meat. It was among the many things he would investigate and include in his reports later. Big Mona paused. His eyes narrowed.
"I didn't like to, but it's not like I have a choice. Bun, have you heard of the Bloodstone before?" "Of course," said Big Bun. "It's the dream of all alchemists, the ultimate potion capable of healing even the gravest of wounds. But that thing is a mere legend. It's impossible to create a miracle drug of such quality."
Big Mona sipped from his goblet. He breathed in.
"If I do things right, I might get my hands on it."
Everyone in the room froze, including Mikhail. Big Mona's claim was preposterous.
What are you talking about?"
Big Bun stuttered. Big Mona paused and looked at the merchants.
"Each one of you are my trusted comrades."
He looked at Mikhail, but quickly averted his gaze, as though dismissing the presence of a mere serf.
"All of you have been with me since the beginning, when we were upstarts, merchants without any power or background. I trust that all of you will keep this a secret."
Big Mona took out a small vial from his pocket and placed it on top of the table.
"This is a potion comparable to the one created by the master herbalist and alchemists in the capital."
He paused.
"No, it's even better than that."
"Its vial is different from those kept in the king's castle,"
Big Bun noted.
"Are you telling us that a different group made that thing?"
"Exactly,"
said Big Mona.
"This potion is capable of healing cuts in a matter of seconds, and I've just gained the formula on how to create this one en masse."
Everyone held their breaths.
"Then we can compete with the capital. We'll easily gain enough power to rival the merchant guild in Behemoth City."
"Please order us to immediately procure the materials, sir." "That's right." Big Mona slammed his fist on the table. Everyone quieted down.
"This is nothing but garbage when compared to the real thing."
"Real thing?"
said Big Bun.
"That's right."
Big Mona nodded.
"If I successfully help that damn brat in defending his town from those beastmen, I'll be getting my hands on the Bloodstone."
Although Lark called the promised medicine a middle-grade potion, Big Mona was sure that it was the legendary Bloodstone. After all, only the Bloodstone could generate healing power so much greater than the potion he currently held. Big Mona continued with his story. According to him, the Lord of Blackstone Town requested 1,000 soldiers to help repel the invasion of beastmen. It was a peculiar request, since according to their intel, the Valley of Witches had yet to fall in the hands of the United Gracchus Alliance. As long as Alexander was alive, the beastmen would be unable to penetrate the eastern region of the kingdom. But the peculiarity of the request did not matter to the merchants. What mattered was the reward. And if the reason behind the request was true, then they would also benefit from it. After all, Blackstone Town was close to Lion City. If the beastmen had managed to penetrate that far into the kingdom's territory, then it would only be a matter of time before they targeted Lion City. As Mikhail listened to the conversation, his interest in Lark Marcus grew. That young noble had single-handedly stirred up these merchants, and now he was requesting 1,000 soldiers to repel the invasion from United Gracchus Alliance. Could he actually do it? Judging by the story, it seemed that the army of beastmen numbered more than 10,000. And there was also the fact that Lark Marcus was the one who gave the recipe for the healing potion to Big Mona. Where did he get it? Did he steal it from the Herbalist Association? From the capital? There were so many questions that needed answers. That young noble was considered incompetent by all other nobles and competitors for the throne. Even his daughter, Elaine, believed that Lark Marcus had the least chance of winning the competition for the throne. Mikhail's instinct screamed at him that there was something wrong with the rumors.
"So, what happened with the meeting with Valkyris?"
said Big Bun. Big Mona grinned.
"It took some sacrifices, but I managed to convince the damn bastard. He'll be lending me 800 soldiers. For the remaining 200, I'll personally hire the small mercenary guilds in the city."
"You bribed him with beastmen meat, huh?" Big Bun guessed.
"Close,"
Big Mona nodded.
"But that alone wouldn't be enough."
He grinned.
"I gave him an offer he wouldn't be able to refuse. Who would have thought that event in the past would have its use? Amusing."
Big Bun understood what his brother was saying.
"That thing, huh? He wouldn't be able to refuse you if you told him that, as expected of my brother."
The two laughed, and the rest of the merchants joined in. Mikhail could not believe his luck that he was allowed to partake in this feast. It provided him the perfect opportunity to eavesdrop on important topics. He could already imagine the king's reaction once he reported these findings. Big Bun looked at him.
"Mikhail?"
Mikhail acted afraid and lowered his head.
"Sir?"
"Good news," said Big Bun.
"The army will depart tomorrow morning. You can accompany them. And since I promised, I'll personally come with you and take you to Blackstone Town. You'll see your old man soon. How about it?"
Mikhail meekly replied, "I'm really grateful, sir." Chapter 16. Stone and his men made their way back toward the main army's camp. They slapped the reins of the burr cats relentlessly, not stopping to recuperate even for a while. Unlike the optimistic Kale, Stone did not believe the beastmen stood a chance against the humans. There was no way they would be able to win against those numbers, now that Commander Azura was gone. The best course of action now was to go back and report this incident to the general. Although this seemed cowardly, it was his task as the captain of the scouts.
"Captain, can't we rest for a bit?"
Moleth complained. She was huffing and clung desperately to her mount. For some reason she could not explain, strength seeped out of her body. Stone noticed it too. Even he was finding it difficult to keep moving. It was as though an invisible force was sucking away his mana. If this went on, he would eventually lose consciousness and collapse.
"We're not stopping,"
said Stone. He slapped the reins. The burr cat neighed, and they sped up through the plains. The grasses swayed westward under the assault of the wind.
"We need to reach the main camp as soon as possible and report everything to the general."
There was something peculiar about that town, about those humans.
Damn it. If only Commander Azura had listened to me. If only I didn't tell him that the human commander is probably stronger than him, then maybe...
Stone regretted that they did not wait for the reinforcements to arrive. The additional 1,000 beastmen would have made a tremendous impact in the outcome of the battle. Against such a number, the enemy's surprise ambush with only a handful of soldiers in the middle of the forest would never have been successful.
So in the end, your foolishness was your bane, Commander.
Stone clicked his tongue. Dead men tell no tales. He had to live and fully recount the details of this battle.
"Salith!"
A shout reverberated. Stone looked back and saw that his men had stopped in their tracks. He immediately saw why. Salith was lying on the grass-carpeted ground, her chest rising and falling repeatedly. She kept clutching her chest, her body squirming occasionally. He pulled the reins of his mount and halted.
"Salith!"
Moleth jumped down from her mount and crouched next to her twin sister.
"What's wrong? Are you all right?"
Salith turned over and vomited on the ground.
"Go on without me. I'll stay here and rest."
Stone approached his men. He crouched down and touched Salith's chest. He frowned. He turned to the two remaining beastmen.
"Tell me, are you two experiencing it too? The sensation of your mana being slowly pulled out of you?"
The two beastmen widened their eyes. The captain's description was spot on.
"Yes."
They nodded. Stone groaned. He realized that all of them had been poisoned. But how did their enemy do it? He racked his brain but could not figure out how.
"We'll make camp here," he said finally. "I'm not sure what kind of poison those humans used on us, but one thing is sure. It's sucking away our mana."
Stone took a vial from his pouch. Moleth stared at it.
"Make her take a sip of this," said Stone.
Moleth froze.
"But Captain, that's a paralyzing potion."
Stone nodded.
"Exactly. This blocks the flow of mana in the body of one who drinks it. It's the same paralyzing potion I gave that old man. The poison inflicted on us seems to be sucking away our mana. If my guess is correct, then this paralyzing potion should temporarily halt the progression of the disease. It won't cure it, but it'll allow us to last until we arrive at the main camp."
The captain's theory made sense. He had immediately formulated a solution to the problem, despite not knowing the exact poison inflicted on them. Moleth's hands shook as she helped Salith take a sip from the vial. Seconds passed and turned into minutes. The effect of the paralyzing potion became clear. Although Salith was unable to move, the symptoms had lessened somewhat. It seemed that the mana-blocking effect of the potion counteracted the poison inside Salith's body. Moleth sighed with relief.
"Thank you, Captain," she said.
Stone looked at the sky. It was already dusk. Although he still wished to move back to the main camp, the current circumstances did not permit him. He was trying his best to not show it, but he could also feel the effects of the poison. He did not wish to take the paralyzing potion as temporary antidote, since it would slow him down tremendously. He decided to save it as last resort.
"Pitch the tent," he said to Moleth and the other beastmen. "I'll prepare our meal." "Understood."
Despite their sluggish movements, the three started to move. Stone made a campfire and started roasting the tiny piece of meat jerky they had left. He mixed it with the remaining water from his flask and made a soup. This was the last food they had. Unfortunately, aside from the birds that had been hovering above them, there were no animals around. Stone wished the gods would at least provide them with a hunt. Even a rabbit or a frog would suffice. Mentally, he cursed the damnable humans for burning their rations. Resisting the unknown poison would have been easier with a full stomach. While they were eating their meal, Moleth asked Stone,
"Captain, once we get back to the main army—"
She paused after almost swallowing her next words.
"We'll be executed, won't we?"
Stone stared straight in her eyes. He could see the fear. He could only be honest to the lizard.
"Most probably, yes."
Although they had fled the battle for the sake of reporting back, it was still an act punishable by death. Stone knew the outcome of this decision the moment he decided to flee from that nightmare.
"But worry not, Moleth," said Stone. "I will ask the general to spare the three of you. After all, it was my decision as your captain that made you flee that battlefield."
Stone's subordinates protested. They almost dropped the bowls of soup they held.
"I won't allow that," shouted Moleth. "It's obviously the fault of Commander Azura. Why should the captain be executed because of that musclehead's—"
"Enough," interjected Stone. "The rules of the 3rd Legion are absolute. As long as the general receives my message, I don't mind being executed. This is my pride as captain of the Scouts."
Moleth seemed unconvinced. Stone reiterated,
"Listen, we're still not safe until we reach the main army. Those humans are probably searching for us even now. In the event that I die, it'll be your duty to pass on what we've learned about those humans. Make sure the general does not take them lightly. Don't let him make the same mistake as Commander Azura. Do you understand?"
Moleth willed back the tears in her eyes. Unable to utter a word, she simply nodded her head once. Stone sighed in relief. He wished that his body would last longer. He wished it could keep going at least until they reached the main army. Even now, he could feel his mana leaking out of his body.
"The symptoms are really similar to magic poisoning. But it doesn't make sense. How did they poison us?"
Several questions kept popping into his head, but he was unable to answer all of them. He noticed that all of his men had fallen asleep. They seemed to be greatly affected by the poison, more than he thought. He smiled wryly.
"I guess I'm tonight's watch."
Stone gently carried the sleeping members of his team inside the tent. Looking at them, he felt like a father. If he had a child, would it be like this? Stone smiled. As he exited the tent, Stone heard the chirping of birds from above. He frowned. He was sure those were the same birds from before.
Why do they keep following us?
An idea dawned on him. He shuddered. What if those birds had been keeping watch on his group this entire time? Stone shook his head. Impossible. Animal tamers capable of such an advanced skill were rare, even in the United Gracchus Alliance. There was no way they would ever encounter a human with those same skills anywhere, let alone in that remote town. The best those couriers could do was deliver messages.
I must be getting paranoid. Damn it.
Stone shook the thought from his mind. He breathed in the cold breeze of the night, then sat down cross-legged on the grass-carpeted ground. He closed his eyes as a part of his consciousness stayed awake and kept watch.
Footsteps.
Stone opened his eyes and grabbed his scimitar. He looked around. No one was there. Only the grasses, swaying left and right in the wind, were visible. Oh, are they sleeping? Those companions of yours? A chilly voice spoke in the darkness. What a pity. I guess this is enough for now. Stone unsheathed his weapon.
Who are you? Show yourself!
There was silence. Stone was sure that the owner of the voice was staring straight at him. Thankfully, the poison's been effective thus far. It would have been harder to catch you if you kept moving forward.
Show yourself!
Shouted Stone again. Behind him, he could feel his comrades start waking up. You used a similar magic to infiltrate my territory, didn't you? Said the voice. Its anger was palpable. Not only that, you dared harm my people. Without warning, a fist struck Stone's face. His neck bent sideways, his body followed, and he flew and rolled across the ground several times. The impact was so tremendous that he felt numb all over. It was as though he had been struck with a sledgehammer. By now his men had woken up from all the clamor. They left their tents, and upon seeing their captain sprawled on the ground, they pulled out their weapons. Stone wanted to warn them, to tell them to run. Only unintelligible sounds came out. If only he was in better condition, then escaping would be possible.
But I still have to try.
Just when he was about to cast his invisibility magic, vines popped out of the ground and ensnared his legs. He tried pulling them out, but failed. Stone looked up instinctively. He shuddered when he saw several swords made of fire hovering above. He knew at whom the weapons were pointed.
Run!
He shouted. But it was too late. The swords of fire shot at his men, piercing their chests. As though that was not enough, their bodies were soon engulfed by flames. Their cries and wails echoed as the flames licked their bodies. Eventually they fell to the ground, scorched and lifeless. Stone noticed that the tent where Solith was recuperating was also on fire. For a moment he heard a cry for help coming out of it. Stone clenched his fists. He felt powerless. He could do nothing but watch as his men succumbed to their injuries. Even now, he could not pull himself out of these shackles. "The old man you took hostage before," said the voice. "He's like family to me, you see?" Stone could feel the hatred directed at him. Slowly, a figure manifested directly in front of him. A human. A young man with short silver hair and cold blue eyes. Upon locking eyes with the human, Stone froze. He could not move even his fingertips. Was this magic? Or was he frozen in fear after seeing those predatory eyes? Stone was not sure. "I still need your head, so I won't be burning you," the human whispered in his ear. "But the same isn't true of the rest of your body." The human took a small seed from his pouch. His hand blurred as it moved and pierced Stone's chest with the seed. Stone tried screaming in pain, but no words came out. In his body, he could feel the seed forming roots and expanding. It was as though several worms were squirming inside him. It was a disgusting feeling. "Flowers," said the human. "Bloom for me." On cue, the roots of the seed expanded further. They pierced through the different parts of Stone's body, growing to form vines and leaves. Seconds passed, and flowers started blooming. A sweet fragrance wafted through the air. Aside from the head, the entire body of Captain Stone had turned into a plant, a beautiful one filled with fragrant flowers. The human pulled out his sword and cut off the lizard man's head. He then placed it inside a small sack. He sighed. "It took me almost 3 days to catch these guys." He looked up. The night sky was moonless tonight. "I should head back. It's just about time for my reinforcements to arrive." Chapter 17. The time for departure to Blackstone Town arrived. 1,000-strong army, which consisted mainly of soldiers from the city and some merchants, gathered at the outskirts of Lion City. The news of an armed force marching toward a certain town in the east reached the ears of many. Near the gates, onlookers gathered.
"Brother, are you really coming with us?"
said Big Bun.
"If what that young noble said in the letter was true, then war could break out at any time. It's too dangerous."
Big Mona took a large bite from the bread in his hand. He spoke with his mouth full.
"I'll be fine. These guys will protect me no matter what."
Behind Big Mona were the elites of his personal army. Big Bun knew those guys very well. Even a seasoned veteran from the mercenary guild would have a hard time defeating even a single one of them. Seeing that they would tag along, he could rest assured.
"I see."
Big Bun looked at the army gathered outside the city. It was actually an amazing feat, gathering these men, since the Lake of the Full Moon incident had occurred recently. According to their intel, a large bulk of the soldiers of Lion City were sent to fortify the defenses around that place, just in case monsters started invading the city borders. Big Mona leaned closer to his little brother. He whispered,
"Listen, if war does break out, leave quickly. Our priority is not to win the war, but to secure Lark Marcus, to make sure he stays alive. If he dies, the Bloodstone disappears with him. Do you understand?"
Big Bun nodded. This meant one thing. Right now, the life of Lark Marcus was secondary only to his and his big brother's. It was understandable, since the man could unlock the secrets of that legendary artifact, the Bloodstone, the elixir capable of healing the gravest of wounds, the so-called elixir of life. Big Bun had tested the low-grade potion. Indeed, it was comparable to the healing potion created by the alchemists in the capital. No, it was probably even better than that. They have to get their hands on the so-called middle-grade potion, no matter what. A rough-looking man with numerous scars on his face approached the two merchants. Had they not known better, they would have mistaken him for a forest bandit.
"Sir, the preparations are complete."
The man bowed his head.
Commander Daltos, good job.
Big Mona tapped the man's shoulder.
Order everyone to move out. Yes, sir.
After receiving their instructions, the army started moving out of the city's outskirts. Several carts filled with rations followed the infantry, while the cavalry led the front. All of the soldiers had been briefed about the goal of this expedition. They were here to block the advance of the beast men toward the kingdom, but not everyone believed this. They knew that the Valley of Witches had not yet fallen into the hands of the enemy. As long as Alexander was blocking those damnable beastmen's path, there was no way for them to step foot on the soil of this kingdom. But since the commission provided by the Lord's Castle and the Merchant Guild was over-generous, the soldiers willingly accepted the task. The same went for the mercenaries hired from numerous small guilds within the city. The deal was that even if the army from the United Gracchus Alliance did not come, everyone in this army would still get their share of profit. A win-win situation for everyone. With great haste, the army marched relentlessly, stopping only to recuperate several hours after dusk. After 4 days, they finally reached Blackstone Town. This would already be considered a feat for such a large army composed mostly of infantry. After all, it would normally take 5 to 7 days to reach the town by foot. By cart, it would take 2 days. Mikhail looked out of the cart he was riding in. Just as described in the reports given to him personally by the king, the town was located near the wilderness. One needed to pass through a thick forest, then across a small plain before arriving at the town. The arrival of the army caused a commotion in the residents of Blackstone Town. Most of the locals hid in their homes, while the younger men went to the town's border to meet the officials of the army. Leading them was an old man in a suit.
"Welcome. We've been expecting you," said the old man. "I'm sorry that we're unable to give a proper greeting, honorable sirs. This town is undergoing massive reconstructions."
Mikhail doubted they had been expecting him. Most likely, the old man was the only one who knew the arrival of this army. This was apparent after seeing the terrified and wary faces of the people with him.
"My name is Gaston." The old man bowed his head. "And the young master ordered me to lead our esteemed guests to the Lord's mansion to partake in a small feast."
Big Mona and Commander Daltos stepped forward.
Big Mona,
said the fat merchant. He looked around, as though expecting to see a familiar face among the crowd.
I came here at the request of your master. Where is he?
Gaston bowed his head lightly.
"I'm sorry, but the young master is currently unavailable at the moment."
Unavailable?
Big Mona raised an eyebrow.
"Yes."
Gaston's back remained ramrod straight.
"He's been gone for more than a week now, after leading the soldiers to intercept the invading Beastmen army."
Despite his old age, the voice of Gaston was loud and clear. Several soldiers froze when they heard this story, Mikhail among them. Intercept the Beastmen army? So it was true. Questions ran through the minds of everyone who heard what the old man said. Surprisingly, Big Mona accepted this reasoning, then asked a completely unexpected question in return.
He's not dead, is he?
Gaston's eyes glimmered for a moment.
"Ah, of course not. The young master is the embodiment of wisdom. He wouldn't die just like that."
It was a hyperbolic statement, but it was apparent from the old man's expression that he believed all of the words he had spouted. Embodiment of wisdom was completely contrary to what people thought of the second son of Duke Dracus. To the nobles in the capital, he was an arrogant brat that knew nothing of his bounds. Mikhail was sure that the other candidates to the throne did not see him as a competitor at all. Mikhail was starting to get curious about this Lark Marcus.
Embodiment of wisdom?
Chuckled Big Mona.
That brat?
He shrugged.
Well, I've got to admit that one's shrewd, like a fox. You say you prepared a feast for us?
Gaston momentarily closed his eyes.
"Of course."
"I'm hungry. We're going to eat,"
declared Big Mona.
"Dalton, command the army to make camp outside the town. This place is too small to accommodate everyone."
"Understood."
"Bun,"
said Big Mona.
"Come."
Big Bun fixed his collar.
"Yes, brother."
He walked briskly toward Mikhail, then flashed a smile.
"I guess this is where we part. You are no longer under the protection of my caravan. Go. See your old man."
Big Bun slapped Mikhail's back, then jogged toward his brother. After a while, the officials of the army disappeared with the old man. To Mikhail, this made things much easier. From now on, he could move freely and assess this candidate for the throne. Just thinking that he could serve the king once more filled him with pride and joy. While the soldiers were busy making camp, Mikhail entered the town. It seemed that the reason the army was in town was finally explained to the locals. Several men and women, children included, came out of their homes and looked curiously at the army camped outside the town.
"The young master's safe, right?" "Of course. Father's with him. He told me that he'll protect the Lord."
But to think that the young master managed to bring this much reinforcement, I feel we could really defeat those lizards, as expected of the young master."
His tattered old clothes and common-looking face made it easy for Mikhail to blend in with the locals. As he surveyed the town, he listened to the conversations of the residents around him. He had not expected the residents to be this amicable to the young noble. According to the reports from the capital, the noble Lark Marcus was a devil incarnate, an abomination, hated by everyone. But after listening to just these few conversations, it seemed that the rumors were not totally true. Mikhail especially took note of the word lizard. Judging by the way the residents talked about those beastmen, it seemed like they've encountered them before. It was as though they had personally seen those barbarians eye to eye.
I'll include this in my report later.
Mikhail kept looking around the town, all the while carefully blending in with the locals. He realized that the road was becoming more paved as he went deeper in. It was not cobbled, but made of a different material entirely. It was as though the road itself had solidified into a single piece of flat rock. This road could likely accommodate 4 carriages running side by side. It was comparable to roads in major cities, probably even better than that. He was still examining the road when he finally arrived at the Eastern District. Numerous homes were being built there. But what surprised Mikhail the most was not the houses, but the dirt used to build them. They were made of soil or clay, he was not sure. The workers were using solid blocks stacked on top of each other. In the middle was the peculiar clay. Would these houses actually hold using such a method? Mikhail doubted this at first, but soon he realized that the houses around him were all uniformly built. The finished houses he saw around the district must be made of the same materials. Mikhail approached one of the finished houses. He knocked on the wall. It was firm and solid. For a moment he fell silent. Mikhail did not know much about construction, but he was sure of one thing. This clay, or whatever it was a revolutionary item capable of improving the lives of everyone in the kingdom. He had never seen such a convenient method of building structures before. Based on what he heard from the conversations of the workers, it seemed that the clay needed only a few hours in order to harden like rocks.
"Ah, Anthony, you're delivering food to the mines again, eh?"
Mikhail saw a child pulling a wooden cart. It was filled to the top with small crates.
"Of course."
The child grinned, showing an incomplete set of teeth.
"I earned quite a bit of money last week. I'll treat you to some jerky once I get my next pay, Uncle. Look forward to it."
"Treat me to some chicken from the poultry farm instead. Come to my house, I'll cook it for you."
"Hey, that's too expensive."
Laughter filled the air. Mikhail's thoughts wandered elsewhere. Poultry farm. There was a poultry farm in this small town? That was not written in the report. As far as he knew, this was a desolate town with literally nothing to offer. And mines. There's no record of any mines in Blackstone Town. Mikhail decided to follow the child. After walking through the endless forest, he finally arrived at the mine, a cavern whose size was hard to estimate. He watched several men coming and going. Once they saw the child called Anthony, they all cheered.
"The free porridge from the mansion's here, finally!"
The workers dropped their pickaxes and approached the child.
"Hey, what's the toppings this time?"
The child grinned. He opened a large sack next to the crates.
"Guess."
"Meat jerky?"
The workers were enthusiastic. The child shook his head.
"It's eggs."
The workers clenched their fists and cheered. Mikhail could sympathize with them. After all, eggs were a luxury. Commoners could probably get only 1 or 2 in a week. At least, that was the norm in the capital. Mikhail silently observed the miners as they ate their fill.
"Something's wrong."
Mikhail frowned. The Black Famine struck the entire kingdom last harvest season. Those pesky insects destroyed the crops, sparing no one regardless of rank. According to the reports, the famine extended its claws even to some cities in the empire. Mikhail was sure that this remote town was among those that were affected. But what was going on? These miners were all well fed. There were no signs of emaciation at all. It was as though this particular town had been spared from the famine several months earlier. The same could be said of the locals he passed by along the way. As Mikhail continued listening to the laughter-filled conversations, he soon learned the truth. The Lord is feeding all of his subjects, at least until the next harvest arrives? Mikhail could not believe it. Even in the capital, one would be hard-pressed to find a noble like that. In Behemoth City, there was a clear demarcation between the nobles and commoners. Those in the upper echelons never batted an eye, even when their subjects were dying from hunger during the Black Famine. He was plagued with so many questions after stepping in this town only a short while ago. Mikhail remembered the decree of the king. It had been a wise decision to personally send the knights to assess the candidates. The rumors surrounding Lark Marcus. He had not met the young man himself, but he had seen things with his own eyes. The rumors were not entirely true. Those laughing faces, those eyes filled with vigor, subjects ruled with tyranny would never have such expressions. "Hey, are you a new worker?" A bearded man noticed him. Mikhail broke out of his thoughts. He had been too careless. Lost in his thoughts, he failed to properly hide his presence. Well, that is... "Never seen you before?" The bearded man scrutinized him from head to toe. "I'm pretty familiar with the faces of the locals." Mikhail was about to utter an excuse when the man suddenly laughed. "It's fine. No need to be so stiff. See little Anthony over there?" Mikhail looked at the child handing out the porridge and eggs. He noticed that the eggs were not given whole, but were instead sliced into 4 portions each, before being handed out. "He's just like you. I was there when he asked the young master for work." The man chuckled. "Such an adorable kid. If I were his brother, I would have been so proud." His eyes danced as he looked at Mikhail. "You're probably tired of tilling the soils in the northern farmlands, eh? Good choice coming here. The payment's higher as long as you work your ass off, lad." The bearded man was probably 10 years older than him, maybe more. Mikhail was not sure. He noticed gray patches in the man's hair. This old man probably mistook him for a farmer who sought higher pay. A similar thing probably happened often, since the old man was not surprised at all by this stranger in their town. "That's right." Mikhail bobbed his head. "I wonder if there's a vacancy—" "There is!" The man did not even wait for him to finish. He wrapped his arm around Mikhail's shoulder. This old man was muscular despite his old age. "Come, I'll lead you to the scholar. She'll be pleased to have more working hands for the mine." To properly assess this candidate, Mikhail had no choice but to disguise himself as a resident of this place. The moment he accepted the job from the king, he was prepared to spend the next 4 years of his life living here. Mikhail smiled. Things had suddenly taken an interesting turn. The rumors surrounding Lark Marcus were not entirely true. He had been considered the candidate with the least potential of winning the throne. But what if everything was nothing but a facade? What if the young man was a genius who chose to conceal himself? Just thinking of these possibilities made Mikhail's blood boil. He had not felt like this since several years ago, back when he participated in the bloody Thorn Plains incident. "Lark Marcus, just what kind of noble are you?" Mikhail could not wait to find out. Chapter 18. 2 days had passed since the army arrived at Blackstone Town. Lark and his soldiers still hadn't returned. Mikhail had adjusted to the life here. Using a made-up story of his previous life in Lion City, he pretended to be an immigrant who wished for a peaceful life in the countryside. For 2 days, he worked as a miner. This was an easy task, since knights like him had several times the strength of an average individual. Very quickly, his talent in mining was recognized by everyone. "Look at that guy," a familiar voice spat. "He's just a greenhorn. It's not even a week since he started working here, and he's already so familiar with the scholar. What an ass." The owner of the voice did not bother lowering his volume. Mikhail was sure the comments were all about him. For the past 2 days, this man had been bad-mouthing him non-stop. The miner next to Mikhail shook his head. Don't mind him. Arturo has been like that ever since we started. He cast a glance at Arturo, a short, muscular man in his early 30s. I heard he's got some dwarven blood in him. Those guys are really proud of their blacksmithing and mining skills, you see. Even if the miner did not tell him these things, Mikhail had not any intention of fighting him. It was a petty squabble, after all. Mikhail was more interested of other things. Is it true that the northern farmlands were non-arable several months ago? The miner, whose name Mikhail did not yet know, nodded his head. His pickaxe struck a hard object in the ground, and he stopped. Yes and no. There used to be a small field there where we planted vegetables and herbs, but aside from that, the rest of the northern land is non-arable. Even weeds find it hard to grow in that soil. Hearing this, Mikhail could not help but be bewildered at the things happening in this town. He had visited the northern farmlands yesterday, and he was surprised to see a field of green covering everything. Numerous small shoots grew on the ground, each of them spaced evenly from each other. He had been to Golden Wheat City before, the richest city in the entire kingdom, next only to the capital, and he was sure those shoots were wheat. In the next few months, they would grow and cover the entire northern lands with a shade of gold. Looking further, Mikhail noticed an artificially made river, the irrigation system, running next to the fields. It branched into numerous forks with several stoppers at each path, controlling the amount of water passing through. Mikhail later learned that the irrigation system was connected to the abundant river from the endless forest. With this, even if drought came to this town, the crops would not easily wither and die. He could not help but be awestruck upon seeing this spectacular sight. It's as though one of the 3 great mines of the kingdom visited and created a reconstruction program. You told the head miner that you're a farmer. That was a lie, right? The man next to him began striking the rocks once again. I'm sorry. Mikhail stopped and bowed his head slightly. I was afraid you would kick me out of this town if you found out that I'm an immigrant. That's fine. The man brushed it off aside. You probably don't know him, but the mason in charge of all the massive projects in this town also came from Lion City. There are a lot of guys like you, actually. They get tired of living there, living life inside the slums. I understand why people would choose to live in this small town instead. Upon the mention of the massive projects, Mikhail understood. He had seen those construction projects, the structures too ambitious for such a small town. Yesterday, after working at the mines, he went around the town and saw them with his own eyes. The poultry farm with hundreds of chickens running around. Looking around the southern district, he saw many more chicken coops. Mikhail was sure that several hundreds, maybe thousands, of chickens would be added later. The numerous houses being built left and right in the eastern district. The Kaurani stones installed on top of wooden posts, lighting up during the night. Coupled with the paved main road, the reclaimed northern farmland, the irrigation system, the free porridge for the locals and the mines, Mikhail could already report that the achievements of Lark Marcus were colossal. When are you going to come back? He could not wait to meet the young man. Hey, stop chatting during work! Arturo tossed his pickaxe to the ground and stomped his way toward Mikhail. Despite being a head shorter, he glared haughtily at the newcomer. New guy, if I see you slacking again, I'll personally report you to the scholar. You got that? Arturo showed Mikhail his large fists. Yes, I'm sorry, said Mikhail. I'll work quietly next time. Arturo snorted. Good. He returned to his post, wearing a satisfied expression. He even started humming as he struck the rocks with his pickaxe. People like him were everywhere. Mikhail was well aware of this. He locked eyes with the miner next to him for a moment. They both had a look of resignation on their faces. Arturo was hopeless, and getting into a petty squabble with him would be a waste of time. They both knew this. Let's just work, sighed the man. Mikhail picked up his pickaxe and silently went on with his work. A temporary life like this was not bad at all. After work, Mikhail stealthily went deeper into the endless forest, to a place where no people went. He took out a plain-looking stone. It was a fist-sized rock one could expect to find on the roadside. After making sure that no one was around, he started pouring mana into it. Slowly, the stone changed its color. Its dirty brown appearance vanished, and a jade stone with a swirling blue light inside revealed itself. This was the artifact granted to the 28 knights chosen by the king to assess the candidates. Mikhail had been stunned at first upon receiving it, since a single one of these gems cost at least 5,000 gold coins, a massive amount even an average noble wouldn't have. Each of these gems were connected to a mother gemstone, which was currently being kept in the king's castle. As long as one had enough mana, messages could be continually transmitted through. It was an incredibly convenient device when sending messages via couriers was the norm. Mikhail touched the gemstone firmly, and out of thin air, a translucent parchment appeared in front of him. Using magic, he started writing his reports directly to the king. Words started forming on the parchment, as though the gemstone was aware of his thoughts. There were a lot of things Mikhail wanted to report. The incident at the Lake of the Full Moon, the tens of thousands of monsters swarming in that lake, the rumors surrounding Valkyris, the Lord of Lion City, the movements of the merchants, the sudden appearance of the Bloodstone, the massive developments in the town, the fact that the rumors surrounding Lark Marcus may actually be false, that it was nothing but a facade, an act. But since writing messages using this method consumed a great amount of mana, Mikhail had to make his report concise. He would report about the less important things next time. His top priority right now was to report about the town's biggest concern:
the invasion of the United Gracchus Alliance.
The invasion of the Beastmen was of utmost priority right now. After briefly analyzing the topography of the surrounding regions, Mikhail realized the strategic significance of Blackstone Town. If those barbarians successfully captured this territory, they would be pointing a knife directly at the eastern region. Surrounded by a forest so large it was called endless, this town could easily repel invaders by focusing on their front. A large army trying to circumvent the endless forest would be easily detectable, and the same could be said if they attempted to pass through it. And what if the Beastmen converted this town into a stronghold, a castle with battlements, moats, and traps? Just thinking of these possibilities made Mikhail shiver unconsciously. He could not let these Beastmen invade deeper into this territory. If what Lark Marcus said was true, that the Beastmen had invaded this far, then the kingdom should stop them from capturing this town at all costs. Mikhail decided on the contents of his first report: the Beastmen invasion, and Lark Marcus's attempt to stop it. Words continued to form on the translucent parchment. After Mikhail was done writing, the parchment slowly faded into nothingness.
"It's done,"
Mikhail huffed. Reporting using this device was a tedious task which consumed a lot of his mana. The gemstone, after losing its supply of mana, reverted back to the plain-looking stone it had been originally. Mikhail placed the stone inside the pouch on his waist. An appraiser would be able to tell that this item was an artifact, but to other people, it looked like an ordinary stone. Mikhail was grateful for this. At the very least, losing the item to burglars would not be among the things he had to worry about. He breathed in. This forest was peaceful, just like the reports stated. Unlike the forests near the major cities of the kingdom, monsters did not appear here. It was as though the gods themselves were protecting this particular domain. What was at the end of this forest? What would he see if he went deeper in? As far as he knew, the area beyond the endless forest was uncharted. Mikhail looked up. It was already night.
"It's already this late, huh? I need to get back."
This was the time when the mansion opened its gates to give out free porridge. The special delivery by little Anthony was only during the day. At the mansion, there was the same long queue from the locals. Mikhail was sure that these guys did not mind waiting in line. The food was given for free, after all.
"Hey, have you heard?" "Yeah, the young master's back, right? I saw Sir Gaston running to greet him. I never thought I'd ever see that old man run."
Mikhail's ears perked up as he listened to the conversation. Although he was hungry, he decided to forego the free porridge for now. Seeing Lark Marcus with his own eyes was far more important.
"He's back, finally."
Mikhail tightened his tattered cloak around him. Tonight's breeze was chilly. He moved past the numerous people lined up, then went in the direction where the butler supposedly had headed. He soon saw familiar faces. Big Mona, Commander Daltos, and Gaston were conversing with Lark. Looking around, Mikhail noticed that most of the soldiers Lark brought back with him were wounded. Cuts and bruises were evident all over their bodies. Dead bodies. He saw several bodies lying on the ground, each of them covered by cloth. Several locals knelt next to them, crying and wailing. Those were probably the soldiers who had perished during the battle against the Beastmen army. Mikhail actually expected more casualties, considering the natural physique of the Beastmen. Each of them, aside from the rabbit tribe, were inherently stronger than humans. The number of dead soldiers did not even reach double digits. Mikhail could say it was a miracle, if he was asked. What are those? Mikhail stared at the suits of armor standing a good distance away from Lark. The three of them stood still, unmoving. For some reason, those three felt dangerous. But the peculiar thing was that Mikhail could not feel any emotion emanating from them. It was as though they were not human, as though they did not possess life at all. Who are inside those suits of armor? Mikhail wanted to know. But right now, his priority was to assess the candidate for the throne. He amplified his senses. Even while standing a good distance away from the soldiers, he could hear everything. He focused his senses on Lark's group. What do you mean? Commander Daltos was obviously displeased. Are you questioning my authority? Is that it? Lark shook his head. Not at all, Commander. He looked at the army from Lion City. What I'm trying to say is that you should concede all authority to me. I need absolute command of these soldiers if we want to win with just this army. Daltos said to Big Mona, Sir, I know that we are all under your commission here, but please understand that I cannot simply leave the lives of my men in the hands of this kid. He may be a noble owning this territory, but he knows nothing of war. Big Mona looked conflicted. Eventually he sighed. He said to Lark, I'm afraid this is no longer part of our contract. My job is to bring the soldiers here. Persuading them to work for you is a different matter entirely. Commander Daltos bowed his head to Big Mona. Thank you for understanding, sir. He turned to Lark. So, that's how it is. I can't let you take command of my soldiers. Lark sighed. I knew this would happen. He scratched his cheeks. Then, Commander, are you telling me that with 1,000 soldiers, you're capable of stopping the advance of more than 10,000 beastmen? Commander Daltos frowned. Lies. We came here because of the commission, but no soldier believes those beastmen actually managed to get past Sword Master Alexander's nose. I don't know what kind of monsters you encountered along the way that made you lose all those soldiers, but know this. I will not leave the lives of my men in somebody else's hands just like that. Lark paused for several seconds. He said to Anandra, Take that out. Anandra moved to the back and took a large sack with him. Big Mona and Commander Daltos cringed their noses. So that's where the foul smell is coming from, said the commander. You said I know nothing of war, said Lark. He nodded at Anandra, and the sack was opened wide, revealing numerous heads inside. The stench became so unbearable that Big Mona vomited on the ground. But, Commander, it seems that it's you who knows nothing of war. Lark, not bothering to cover his nose from the assault of the stench, approached the sack, leaned down, and grabbed a head inside. Blood had already dried up, but the facial expression of the beast man before he died was apparent before everyone's eyes. This was Commander Azura, said Lark. A pretty decent opponent, I must say. Lark showed them the head. The eyes of the dead beast man seemed to glare at them from the abyss. Big Mona quivered while Commander Daltos creased his brow. You arrived almost 3 days ago, correct? Said Lark. Had I not intercepted this invading army during that time, this town would have already been part of the beastmen's territory. Lark's voice was cold as he added, Even with 1,000 soldiers, if you confronted these guys head-on without weakening them first, you would have hundreds of casualties. Commander Daltos's veins popped up on his forehead. Don't be so arrogant, kid. You won against those bastards through sheer luck, that's all. And if a greenhorn like you managed to defeat them, maybe those beast men aren't much at all. Through his amplified senses, Mikhail noticed the subtle smirk of Lark. His eyes were dancing, as though he had been waiting for this particular statement. Sheer luck, huh? Well, luck is part of one's skills, Commander. Lark shrugged and chuckled. Then why don't we have it this way? Choose your 5 best soldiers, including you. Let's have a friendly match.
A friendly match,
Daltos repeated. That's right, a friendly match, said Lark. If you win, I'll keep my mouth shut. I'll let you take full command of this war. But if you lose, you will obey all of my commands. How about it? There was a pause. Daltos replied.
Fine, but don't expect me to go easy on you just because you're a noble.
Of course, chuckled Lark. Is half an hour of preparation enough? Let's battle it out in front of all the soldiers. It'll be more interesting and convincing that way. Daltos clenched his fists.
Of course. So it'll be a 6 versus 6 battle then. I will not hold back. So don't hold it against me later, kid.
Lark lightly tilted his head. 6 versus 6? No, I'm the only opponent. He added playfully. All 6 of you will come at me at the same time. Make sure you do your best, Commander. Chapter 19. News spread like wildfire. The entire town was in an uproar upon hearing that the young master was going to battle the commander of the soldiers from Lion City. Hundreds of locals gathered outside the town, including the soldiers camped outside. Over 1,000 people gathered to spectate. Commander Daltos breathed deeply. Looking at the young noble, he knew this fight would be easy. After all, he was well aware of the rumors surrounding Lark Marcus. A pampered noble like him would know nothing about fighting, let alone about war. This was why he could not simply hand him the authority over his men. Commander, the soldier beside him said, there's no need for you to fight that brat. He said it's 6 versus 1? How stupid. Just one of us would be more than enough. The other soldiers nodded. These 5 men next to him were the strongest soldiers in his small army, elites who could utilize mana. Even defeating a knight from the royal family was feasible if these 5 combined their strengths. We'll lose face if we all fight him together, said another. Please, just allow one of us to fight. This was the same thought Daltos had. Indeed, in front of 1,000 soldiers, fighting the noble with all 6 of them would be embarrassing. They would become a laughing stock. They did not want to be branded as soldiers who bullied the naive young man. But something bothered Daltos in the back of his mind. Those corpses. He had seen the heads of those dead beastmen. Most of them had their heads cut cleanly off, showing the skill of the one who slaughtered them. Daltos gazed at Lark. He scrutinized him from head to toe. There's hardly any mana flowing through his body. He's just like the rest of these locals. If he's unable to use mana, then... His gaze shifted to the man next to Lark, a handsome man with golden hair. He was around 2 meters tall, and his stoic expression gave the impression of a battle-hardened individual. What was his name again? Anandra? Daltos came to the conclusion that that man must have been the one responsible for the cleanly cut heads of those corpses. The mana leaking out of the man's body was palpable and crude, as though he did not know how to suppress it. Out of all the soldiers serving under Lark Marcus, this man was the only noteworthy opponent. Commander, a soldier reported. The preparations are complete. We can start the battle at any moment. Time sure flies fast, mumbled Daltos. He did not realize that half an hour had already passed by. He turned to the 5 soldiers next to him. Let's go. The moment Daltos and his 5 strongest soldiers made their appearance, everyone burst into an uproar. All eyes were glued to them as they made their way to a large clearing. At its center, Lark Marcus was already waiting. Lark smiled at him. It's a pleasure to have a friendly match with you, Commander. Shall we start? Daltos noticed the circle drawn on the ground. Its diameter was probably 20 meters. I will warn you again, said Daltos. We will not hold back just because you're a noble. Lark's smile remained plastered on his face. He nodded once. Of course, he said to his men. Give them their swords. Wooden swords were handed out to Daltos and his hand-picked soldiers. Upon gripping the swords tightly, they realized they were well made, probably crafted out of black elk wood, an expensive commodity sold in Lion City. "The rules are simple," said Lark. Everyone listened silently as he raised his voice. "It'll be a 6-versus-1 battle. Whoever steps outside of this circle automatically loses the fight. The same goes for anyone who can no longer stand up or fight. And since this is just a friendly match, killing isn't allowed. That's why everyone is handed those practice swords. Instead of real ones, we'll be using these in this fight. As for the reward, the winner shall obey the loser. In simpler terms, if I win, I will be granted full command of this army." Daltos smirked. This young lord feared for his life. This was probably the reason he chose to use wooden swords instead of real ones in this fight. Moreover, he added rules that ensured his safety in this battle. Well, it was a wise decision, Daltos thought.
"And if we win?"
said Daltos. He wanted all of his soldiers to hear it. "I will not intervene with the military matters any longer," said Lark. "And to make things interesting, I'll add an additional 50 gold coins on top of that." The last statement stirred the crowd. It was a magnanimous reward for a mere friendly challenge. Some of the soldiers even wished they were included among the participating 5.
"We accept,"
said Daltos. Although the additional reward was enticing, he was more interested in showing the brat the reality of war. He was too arrogant to request his best soldiers to fight him all at once.
"But there's no real need to do a 6-versus-1 fight. Brahim."
A tall soldier wearing full leather armor stepped forward at the mention of his name.
"He's more than enough to fight you. There's no real need for the rest of us to go, isn't that right?"
Lark's eyes glimmered for a moment. "So, you're telling me that you wish to fight me in a 1-versus-1 battle instead?"
"That's right,"
said Daltos. Fighting the young noble with all 6 of them combined would be a humiliating act. Lark sighed. "I see." He entered the circle. "Come." The moment the two were inside the make-do arena, the soldiers cheered. Some even started betting on who will win. And as Daltos expected, most of the bets were on Brahim. "Come at me any time." Lark's wooden sword remained dangling on his waist. Brahim did not like this. He creased his eyebrows. He looked at Daltos and received the signal that it was okay to beat the noble to a pulp. The horn sounded, marking the start of the fight. He started his dash. With swift movements, he quickly reached Lark. Instead of pulling out his wooden sword, he balled his fists. He wanted to punch this noble and bring him back to reality. That would be a satisfying sight for those watching. "What?" But before his fists could even reach Lark, Brahim suddenly found himself thrown up into the air. Using his quick reflexes, he spun around 3 times and landed on the ground. "You've lost," said Lark. "Next." It took him a couple of seconds before he realized that he had been thrown out of the circle, out of the arena. Brahim froze. He could feel the eyes of everyone on him. Unable to contain the gazes any further, he protested, "But the fight hadn't even started yet." Lark scratched his cheeks. "It'll be a problem if you guys can't even adhere to the rules. It was stated clearly, right? Whoever steps outside this circle automatically loses the fight." Brahim did not know how Lark did it, but he had been thrown suddenly into the air and out of the arena without a fight. He looked at Daltos. The commander was clearly displeased about the outcome of the battle.
"Brahim, that's enough,"
said the commander.
"It's your loss."
Brahim hung his head low.
"Yes, sir."
Commander Daltos breathed in deeply. Although everything happened in a flash, he had seen everything clearly. The young noble used some kind of martial art to redirect the force of Brahim's punch and use it to throw him into the air instead. For some reason, it reminded him of the martial arts of the savages, the one passed down by the god of fighting in the legends. Just to be sure, he warned his men,
"He probably studied at the Leonard Academy. Be careful."
The remaining soldiers nodded. "So that's why he's so cocky, huh? But it takes 10 years before one graduates from that academy. Surely he hasn't learned all of their techniques. A dropout, maybe." The martial arts of the savages was considered one of the 3 strongest martial arts in the entire continent. After the savage clan became part of the kingdom 50 years ago, their teachings spread far and wide. The Leonard Academy, named after the fighting god, was considered the best school teaching their art. According to experts, a graduate of the Leonard Academy could go toe-to-toe with a low-ranking knight, even without using mana. Just the fact that Lark Marcus may have been a former student of that academy made the elite soldiers serious about this match. "So, who's next?" said Lark. He had yet to pull his wooden sword out. This infuriated everyone greatly. Another soldier stepped inside the circle. "Hey, I'm giving you the chance to come at me all at once." Lark sighed. "There's no need for that." The soldier cracked his knuckles. "So, you know a bit of martial art?" He leaned forward, ready to strike at any time. The horn was blown. The soldier stomped his feet on the ground and shot toward Lark. The spectators around them held their breath as the soldier pulled the wooden sword from his waist. He was about to strike the noble when the figure in front of him disappeared suddenly. He felt a hand grab his shoulder, and just like Brahim, he was thrown into the air. He hit the ground and rolled several times before halting to a stop. He gingerly stood up, groaning. He noticed that he had also been thrown out of the arena. What was happening? Everyone watching was as baffled as he was. After Brahim's defeat, he had been cautious of the noble's martial arts. "Next!" Lark's voice tore through the silent crowd. One after another, the so-called elite soldiers in the army were thrown out of the arena. They did not manage to land even a single hit to their opponent. After all 5 of them lost the battle, Daltos snarled, "Stupid bastards! You can't even defeat someone who doesn't use mana!" The 5 soldiers lowered their heads in embarrassment. Daltos entered the circle. He saw Lark chuckling. "What's so funny?" A vein popped on his head. "Everything," said Lark. He looked at the 5 soldiers he had recently defeated. "Tell me, Commander, all 6 of you are capable of using mana, correct?" Daltos did not like the condescending voice of the noble. "That's right. So what?" "Then why did none of them use mana in their fight against me?" "Isn't it obvious? Why should they use mana on someone like you, who can't even use the simplest forms of magic?" Lark paused for several seconds, his eyes scrutinizing the commander. "This is the limit of the commander. I see." Daltos was sure that the noble was referring to his innate ability to command his soldiers. Quickly, he turned livid. He trembled in fury at the thought that someone who could not even use offensive spells was mocking him. "So you want us to use mana, huh?" he snarled. "Fine." Daltos chanted his magic. Slowly a magic circle formed underneath his feet, and his entire body was soon engulfed in flames. His eyes turned crimson and predatory. The soldiers around them gulped. In Lion City, everyone knew the name. Fire Golem. The magician protected by the element of fire. As long as he was covered by those flames, ordinary swords and arrows were rendered useless. The man holding the horn froze. He did not want to blow it. If he did, the young lord might die in this battle. Upon seeing the commander glaring at him, he nervously swallowed. And after several seconds of hesitation, he finally blew the horn to signal the start of the fight. The sound felt enormous, as though it carried the death of the noble with it. Daltos roared and charged the young lord. "Not bad," Lark pointed a finger at the charging beast. "But Commander Azura is far stronger than that." The ground beneath Daltos formed cracks, and in a split second caved in. Daltos's eyes widened in surprise when he saw a magic circle forming in the sky. As his body was being swallowed by the ground, several orbs of lightning started forming out of thin air, right beneath the magic circle. They crackled for a moment, then shot toward him.
"Magic? And 2 elements at once?"
With his body still being swallowed by the ground, Daltos was unable to dodge the orbs of lightning. He was struck continuously, one after another. Despite his so-called impregnable armor of fire, he groaned in pain at each impact. Every orb of lightning pummeled him deeper into the ground, and those that managed to penetrate his armor scorched his flesh. The barrage of attacks continued until Daltos was half dead, almost unconscious. Silence enveloped the crowd. They all stared at the commander lying on the ground, unmoving, then at Lark. Since he did not use mana in his fight against the 5 elites, They had concluded that he was incapable of offensive magic. When the commander charged at him with his body enclosed in flames, the onlookers assumed the worst ending. But reality gave a different picture entirely. "Announce the winner," said Lark. The man holding the horn nervously gulped. Yes." He raised his voice so all could hear him. "The winner is the young lord!" Loud cheers erupted. The soldiers from Lion City realized the roar came from the locals, the children especially were the loudest, proud of their noble. "Young master, young master, young master! Young master, young master, young master!" They did not expect Lark to be this popular among the populace, and judging by their reactions, it seemed that they had all known that Lark was this strong. Lark pointed a finger at the ground. It started moving and spat Commander Daltos out. Lark approached the leader of the army. "Still alive?" said Lark. Daltos replied with a groan. "You're pretty tough, as I expected." Lark took a small vial from his pouch. "This is a middle-grade potion. Drink it." Just as he was about to make Daltos drink the liquid, Big Mona came running. "Wait!" The fat man ran so fast that he was huffing, almost collapsing to the ground several times. Beads of sweat flowed down his face.
"Wait!"
repeated Big Mona.
"Middle-grade potion? I want to see it. I want to see it with my own eyes, what it's like."
Lark stared at the fat merchant for a moment, before he resumed giving the medicine. After Daltos emptied the vial, the scorched areas on his body dissipated, as though they were being erased by an invisible hand. His face started regaining its color. Slowly he sat up. He shook his head twice and stared at his hands. He mumbled,
"My wounds are all gone."
Daltos could not believe that a potion was capable of this. Even the medicines sold in the capital were not this effective. Big Mona was salivating as he looked at Lark.
"You still remember our deal, right?"
"Of course," said Lark. "You'll be fully compensated once this war is over." Big Mona shrieked.
"Yes! Coming personally to this small town was worth it."
Lark tapped the fat merchant's shoulder. "Let's think about that later. For now, we must do our best to survive." He looked at Daltos. "Commander, I think it's clear who won this fight." Daltos clenched his fists.
"Yes."
Lark took a breath. "Do you know why you lost?" Daltos looked at him quizzically. "You and your men are going to be vital in the war to come. It's important for you to understand your mistakes here and now." Lark raised 3 fingers. "You've made 3 mistakes. First, you gave up the opportunity to fight me 6 versus 1. There are no definite rules in war, Commander. It is not cowardly to fight an opponent using overwhelming numbers." Daltos remembered when Lark suggested a 6 versus 1 battle. He had been too arrogant. Thinking that his opponent was nothing but a brat, he had chosen to fight him one-on-one. "Second, you did not seek information about your opponent beforehand," said Lark. He tapped the shoulder of Big Mona. "This guy knows I'm capable of offensive magic. This is why I gave you half an hour of preparation." Daltos stared at Big Mona. The fat merchant's gaze was still filled with greed after seeing the middle-grade potion. Daltos was sure that had he asked, Big Mona would have told him what he knew about Lark beforehand. "Third, you underestimated your opponent," said Lark. "All 6 of you are capable of utilizing mana, right? Then why is it only you used magic against me?" Daltos hung his head. He could not refute the young lord's statements.
"I lost the battle,"
he finally said.
"As promised, I'll hand over the command of the entire army to you."
The soldiers around them burst into interested murmurs upon hearing this. They did not expect the commander to lose. Now this young lord would have full authority over the entire army. Lark walked to the center of the arena. He raised his voice to the crowd and said, "You heard Commander Daltos? I now hold full authority over this entire army." He paused. "Now, for my first order." Everyone held their breath as they listened. "Dig in the ground. Carry wood and stones. I want all 1,000 soldiers to work together and convert this town into a fortress." He raised his index finger. "Finish this task in 1 week." Chapter 20. Kingdom's capital, Behemoth City. Behemoth City was in a festive mood. Banners hung all over the city as bards sang songs for the royal family. Despite the apparent shortage of food due to the Black Famine, numerous stalls were handing out free food, all of which was sponsored by the royal family. This had been a tradition in Behemoth City during the first day of the month of the sun. Today was a very special day, after all, the Feast of the Sun God. King Alvis was inside his room, standing in front of an orb the size of an ox's head. Every day, without fail, he would check this artifact for messages from the knights he had sent out to assess the candidates. Each of the messages was short and concise, but he enjoyed reading them regardless. Recently, the most interesting reports were about two specific candidates, Kalavinka Kelvin and Louis Marcus. King Alvis knew that Louis Marcus was a genius, but he had not expected Kalavinka to be so capable. According to the reports, the third son of Duke Kelvin successfully annihilated the Mulgrey pirates in the southern Mulgrey Sea. It was an exceptional feat, considering that the kingdom of Lucas did not have a proper navy.
If Kalavinka inherits the throne, we might enter a golden age of sea exploration. We'll no longer fear those pirates, especially those barbarians from Mulgrey Islands.
The king smiled at this thought. The pirates from Mulgrey had begun invading the kingdom recently, pillaging the small villages on the coast. According to his intel, the same thing was happening in the Empire. But since that massive country had a strong navy, they easily repelled the invaders. The Mulgrey pirates had dominated the sea for centuries. The Empire had tried several times to make those barbarians bow down to them, but failed each time. Knowing this, King Alvis had long since abandoned the hope of claiming the islands next to the kingdom. If the Empire, with their strong navy, had failed, there was no way the kingdom could prevail in a naval fight against those pirates. But now, things seemed different. According to the reports, Kalavinka revolutionized the navy of his territory. Using an unknown substance, he created fire capable of burning in water. King Alvis realized there were the endless possibilities if they made proper use of this discovery. The idea of claiming back the lost islands of the kingdom did not seem impossible anymore.
That young man, Kalavinka. When I first met him, he did not dare to look me in the eyes. A timid child. Who knew he would be so capable in a naval fight?
King Alvis looked at the next report. It was from the knight tasked to monitor Louis Marcus. According to the report, the Marcus army started subjugating the monsters from Lowan Plains. The king did not know the reason behind this, but was interested, regardless. That genius commander surely had his reasons for trying to clear that den of monsters.
It's really nice to have lived this long.
King Alvis touched his chest and smiled wryly. He could feel his faintly beating heart.
My only wish is that I live long enough to see the prosperity of this kingdom.
According to the royal court magician who had examined him, he only had 5 years to live at most. This was why, despite the chaos it would cause, he had announced such a decree to the kingdom. The competition for the throne was necessary. He could not afford to leave the throne vacant upon his death.
I'll still have a year left after the competition ends. I will use that time to oversee my successor, to guide him to the right path. The Empire and the Mulgrey Islands are simply biding their time. Once they find the chance, they'll swallow this kingdom.
King Alvis coughed, and a thin line of blood dripped from his mouth. He wiped it off using the back of his hand. The curse of Agaris. It was a disease that ran through the royal family. The previous king and the king before that died of the same curse. According to the legend passed down through the royal family, the first king made a pact with the demon Agaris. In return for consuming a portion of the soul of all the king's descendants, the demon helped the human in founding the kingdom. King Alvis was fortunate to have lived this long despite that. Without the help of the royal court magicians, he would have already died a decade ago.
I'm running out of time.
A knock was heard. The voice of his personal guard was heard outside the room. Your Majesty, the dukes have arrived. King Alvis fixed his garb.
Just in time.
There was so much he wanted to hear from the three, and the Feast of the Sun God was the perfect excuse to summon the heads of the three great families. As he was about to leave the room, the artifact glowed, indicating that a new message had just arrived. King Alvis stared at the orb.
From Mikhail?
He remembered the knight well. He was the same knight who served by his side during the bloody Thorn Plains incident. He had assigned the knight to oversee the second son of Duke Dracus. "Your Majesty!" The voice of the guard outside was worried. "Is everything all right?" King Alvis closed his eyes. He would read Mikhail's report once he came back. For now, he decided to meet the three dukes. He opened the door, and the four guards outside immediately bowed.
"Lead me there,"
said King Alvis. Inside the grand hall, dozens of renowned nobles gathered to celebrate the Feast of the Sun God. This was actually a pretext. The real reason for their attendance was to create connections with the powerful men attending the banquet. Out of all these nobles, the ones who were garnering the most attention were the dukes, Kelvin and Dracus. Each of these men lead over 10,000 soldiers. With a single command, legions would march under their flags. It was no exaggeration to say that they held the military might of the entire kingdom. Meeting these dukes was impossible even for knights and barons. All the nobles in this grand hall were eager to make their acquaintance. "Ah, Duke Dracus." Duke Kelvin was the first to approach. His fat body resembled a bloated bag of slime. "So you're also a patron of the Sun God. A pleasant surprise." Duke Dracus smiled politely. They both knew the real reason behind their attendance. "Of course. Griffin City's named after the guardian of Valhalla, after all. There's no way I would miss celebrating the birth of the Sun God." Duke Kelvin sipped his wine. "Is that so? No wonder the temple in Griffin City worships the water god." A sarcastic remark. It was a well-known fact that the water god and the sun god were rivals, antagonistic deities that tried to kill each other before the time of mortals. Duke Dracus concealed his hatred. He knew that no matter what he did or said here, this pig would never learn his place. He kept his smile plastered on. "The Marcus family believes in the 7 gods. It's only natural," said Duke Dracus. He looked around and momentarily gazed at the nobles chatting merrily in the grand hall. Each one of them wore smiling faces, but he knew those were masks concealing their demons. "It seems that Euchester is late, as always." Euchester was the youngest of the 3 dukes, a man in his early 40s. Unlike the other 2, he never showed real interest in power struggles. When the king declared the competition for the throne, Duke Euchester said that he would wholeheartedly serve the new king, regardless of which family he came from. He allowed his sons to participate in the competition, but refused to openly take part in the small skirmishes between the great powers. Duke Dracus actually liked the young duke, despite his easygoing personality. Whenever he conversed with Euchester, he could feel the man's sincerity, a stark contrast to this scheming pig before him. The Grand Chamberlain entered the hall. He cleared his throat and declared in a loud voice, "The embodiment of God Nerus, the heart of the sun, His Majesty, King Alvis Lucas VI has arrived. Everyone, show your respect." The chattering died down immediately. Everyone, including the dukes, bowed their heads in respect as the king arrived.
"Raise your heads,"
said King Alvis. Everyone raised their heads and gazed at the king standing on the pedestal.
"I would like to thank everyone for coming here to celebrate the feast of the Sun God, the deity of Behemoth City, the protector of our kingdom," said King Alvis. "We have prepared a feast. Please, eat to your heart's content."
On cue, several servants came in, pulling food carts with them. The already sumptuous feast spread on the tables was extended further with more delicacies and alcohol.
"To liven the evening, we have invited the famous Blue Moonlight Troupe."
The king spread his arms wide. Upon the mention of the troupe's name, several men and women entered the hall. The nobles recognized them immediately as the most famous actors and actresses of the kingdom. A single ticket for their play cost at least 50 silvers, a sum only nobles could afford. For the front row seats, the price reached up to 3 gold coins. It was no exaggeration to say that there was not a single noble in the kingdom who did not know the troupe's name. The leader of the troupe took out a small magic stone and, using it, amplified his voice. "We would like to thank your majesty for inviting us to perform a play for the feast of the sun god." He bowed his head before the king. "We have prepared a special play for this moment, a play reenacting the life of the avatar of the sun god, Evander Alastair." Mellifluous music started playing. The leader of the troupe continued. "This play is entitled The Archmagus and the Demon Lord Barkuvara." The celebration of the Feast of the Sun God went on for hours. After the feast, King Alvis summoned the dukes to the throne room.
"You, Chester, didn't come?"
King Alvis frowned. Duke Kelvin and Duke Dracus looked at each other.
"I'm afraid not, your majesty,"
said Duke Dracus. "We should impose a penalty for that man," Kelvin chided. "Ignoring the summons of his majesty is a disrespectful act. Even as a duke, he should—"
"Enough," interjected the king. "I've received the message that his youngest son was down with a terrible fever. I was hoping he could come despite the circumstances, but—" He sighed. "I will let this pass for now."
Duke Kelvin gnashed his teeth. As always, the king was lenient with you, Chester. Was it because that duke was young, almost the same age as the king's oldest daughter? He disliked this thought.
"I summoned the dukes here to discuss important matters concerning the survival of our kingdom."
The statement made the 2 dukes stiffen. They were both aware of the war that had been occurring throughout the kingdom.
"I will get straight to the point," said the king. "I have proposed an alliance with the Dwarven Kingdom."
"The Dwarven Kingdom?" repeated Duke Dracus. "But how?" said Duke Kelvin. "That country closed off their borders several decades ago. Even the Empire is unable to enter their territory in fear of facing the wrath of the dragon protecting it."
"I cannot disclose the method, but I have successfully made contact with their king."
King Alvis coughed twice. Viscount Lachian, the Grand Chamberlain, approached him worriedly. King Alvis waved a hand, dismissing him.
"I'm fine."
He continued.
"The dwarves will provide us with weapons. With this alliance, repelling the invasion of the Empire and the Mulgrey should be feasible at the same time. This is our only shot at survival. I know you are aware, but it is impossible for us to handle a joint attack from those 2 colossal forces. Without the weapons from the dwarves, it would only be a matter of time before our kingdom collapsed."
Weapons from the dwarven race were highly coveted. Each was finely made, strong enough to repel even the strongest attacks from knights. Furthermore, some of their weapons had souls imbued in them. They were weapons capable of utilizing mana by themselves. Those weapons would enable a non-magician to utilize mana, transforming him into a knight in an instant. This was why several countries had tried making pacts with the dwarves, in hopes of acquiring their military might. Unfortunately, a dragon had been protecting the Dwarven Kingdom for centuries. Even the Empire did not dare invade their country, in fear of inducing the wrath of the beast. But there was no such thing as free in this world. Everything had a price. The dukes knew this.
"What do they want in return, your majesty?"
said Duke Dracus.
"Barrels of red plum wine," said the king. 30,000 barrels each month."
The eyes of the 2 dukes widened. The requested amount was absurd. At most, they could provide only 3,000 barrels each. Even Golden Wheat City would be unable to provide such amount year after year.
"Those alcoholic bastards,"
mumbled Duke Kelvin.
"Duke Kelvin, watch your mouth,"
said Duke Dracus.
"We are before His Majesty."
Duke Kelvin shut his lips, but his frown remained. He could already foresee what the king would request of them.
"Can you do it?"
said the king. The 2 dukes were silent for a moment.
"I know that your domains have all been struck by the Black Famine," said the king. To reach the quota of 30,000 barrels, we'll have to convert several farmlands into red plum farms. It'll greatly decrease the sustainability of the affected regions. This much I'm aware. But Calvin, Dracus, we need the help of the dwarves to survive.
Everyone in the room knew that it was only a matter of time before the Empire launched an all-out attack against the kingdom. Furthermore, the threat of the Mulgrey was just around the corner. If they lose the war, they would also lose their lands. Despite their displeasure, the two dukes had no choice but to comply. Duke Dracus was the first to concede with the king's request.
10,000 barrels from each duke. I will make sure to meet the required quota, Your Majesty.
Duke Calvin made a chet sound before bowing his head. The same. I will comply, Your Majesty. King Alvis sighed in relief. He knew of these dukes' temperament. He was glad that they agreed to his request. Now, all that was left was to recruit more soldiers for the army. After the two dukes left, King Alvis remained sitting on his throne. His head throbbed, and stabbing pain radiated through his chest. Seeing this, Viscount Lachien ran to him.
"Your Majesty," said the Viscount.
He shouted at the guards.
"The healers! Call the royal court magicians here, now!"
The guards, their faces pale, immediately left the throne room to call for help. King Alvis's vision blurred. He vomited on the ground. The curse of Agaris had started taking its toll on his body. This was not the first time he had experienced these symptoms, and he noticed they were appearing more frequently lately. King Alvis could feel his consciousness drifting away from him. He could no longer hear the frantic voice of the Viscount beside him. For some reason, a single thought filled his mind. It was not the dwarves, not the impending war with the Empire, not the Mulgrey pirates. It was not even the competition for the throne.
I haven't read Mikhail's report yet.
It was the first time Mikhail made a report to him, and somehow it felt oddly important, as though it would decide the fate of the kingdom. With regret filling his mind, King Alvis's consciousness faded into the black.